FFF-Class Trashero, Chapter 1, it should have been the epilogue. It was a life with no wants. My parents who went to a tennis club each weekend were healthy, and our family wasn't in such dire straits that I needed to study and work part-time at the same time. Fantasy, games, novels, movies, comics. I was an ordinary high schooler who liked these things. That's how it definitely was until 10 years ago. I can't understand even now after 10 years have passed. Why me? Fantasy worlds are supposed to be the welfare center for the disabled that saves social outcasts, the Greenpeace that helps the disadvantaged. Clearly that's how it was in fantasy novels and comics. For instance, someone bullied at school. For instance, a shut-in. Summoning those B-rank humans who found it difficult to live on Earth to a fantasy world, giving material and spiritual support so that they could live a rosy life. Looking back on it now, the way these stories played out was truly retarded. That's why this had to be a mistake. Listen carefully. I lived just fine on Earth. I was a cultured citizen who shared and discussed novels and comics with friends every day. No, my circumstances were better than my school friends. I was a bourgeois who could majestically spend 100 won in front of my friends who went around looking for free events and illegal downloads. Now, if only my face had been a little more handsome. No, never mind. Why is someone like me treated the same as those losers in life? You also think this is wrong, don't you? I looked down at a fallen comrade, seeking agreement. Of course, they had no hope of surviving as I had crushed their heart for certain. But the glaring light in their eyes alone was quite lively. Had this been the law-governed country Korea, somebody who witnessed this scene of slaughter would have reported it to the police and things would have become troublesome. However, this place wasn't Earth. A fantasy world ruled by those with power. A utopia for savages. It was a world where, as long as you had the physical strength, whether it be money, glory, power, women, anything could be had or stolen. Crazy bastard. Even the vehement words full of malice spat by my comrade couldn't shake me. All it was to me was like the barking of some dog. Calling the hero Nim who will be slaying the demon king that threatens humanity crazy. Aren't you touched in the head? I was a hero, someone who was chosen as the apostle of justice. It wasn't a title I decided on. The natives of this world summoned me here and called me as such as they pleased. Saying that I was the hero of legend who would save the world. Somebody like you isn't a hero. Cough. Are those your last words? Quote. There was no retort from that comrade who had vomited blood from between their lips. They were no longer able to glare at me with anger. I turned my back on the comrade, with whom I had shared lasting bad blood, without regret. The corpses of my other comrades had long been scattered around the place, lying on the cold ground. Sword Princess, Fairy King, Sage, Mercenary King. They were heroes who were overwhelmingly stronger than me at one time. But at present, after 10 years have passed since my forced summon to this fantasy world, they were no match for me one-on-one. So I killed them, right before the battle with the last boss, the Demon King. I slew them cleanly by surprise. Oi, try talking again if you happen to be alive. Quote. Weren't you going to kill me as well after killing the Demon King? Ha, who are you kidding? I was able to win thanks to a difference in values. To my comrades this fantasy world was their home where they were born and raised in. If the hero lost to the Demon King then their family, friends and lovers would be at the mercy of the demons, so they couldn't thoughtlessly lay a hand on him. But me on the other hand. It wasn't my business as to how this world ended up. I was going to kill the Demon King and return to Earth, to my family. Now, there was no obstructions blocking my way. Scattered flesh and pieces of bones were scattered left and right in the dark hallway. The pools of blood that had gathered on the stone floor thickly drenched my shoes. There were corpses of humans, corpses of monsters, and corpses of demons who looked somewhat similar to humans. They had all perished together harmoniously. For the sake of sending the hero past this point. For the sake of protecting the Demon King beyond this point. Hero Nim. Why? There was a survivor. The mercenary leaning against the cold wall, dying, asked me this. A close follower of the Mercenary King, I remembered him as a pleasant fellow who would hum a song even in the most dire of situations. His name was probably, let's call him Mercenary A. Having stopped my steps, I answered Mercenary A in a reassuring tone. Why did I kill my comrades? Worry not. I'll take care of the Demon King by myself. My condition is at its peak too now that those bothersome comrades of mine are gone. Quote. You're not humming a song today. I hummed a song through my nose in place of Mercenary A as I moved through the hallway. I merrily hopped over the corpses and obstructions that blocked the way. My footsteps were light like that of a young lady who had come out for a stroll in a beautiful flower garden. Wouldn't I be soaring in the air if I weren't wearing the scale armor made for me by the Dragon King? It wasn't just my body that was in joy. The me of today was in an amazingly good mood. I could swear that I didn't feel as good as now even when I had embraced the #1 beauty of the continent. I channeled that pleasure and slam. I kicked open the splendid-looking doors barring my path with all my might. Creak boom. Beyond the door which couldn't withstand my kick and was destroyed. The Demon King's audience chamber was so spacious that you wouldn't believe it was indoors. But a single intact furniture came into sight, not to mention any demons. That's why it stood out even more. So you have finally reached this place. O chosen hero. At the opposite end from the entrance of the audience chamber, the man who had been sitting on a throne decorated with gems of various colors slowly stood up as he warmly welcomed me. Above his pointy ears was a pair of horns which symbolized demons, but they were larger and more splendidly ornamented than any other demons I had seen to this point. I could easily guess at the status of my opponent just by this feature alone. You're the Demon King. Indeed. I am the very pinnacle of all evil. I am Pedinar, the one who will plunge this world in darkness. A black miasma burst from the Demon King's body after he finished his self-introduction. Seeing that powerful performance of his, I grew convinced that he wasn't one of those clones, fakes that I had slain to the point of getting sick and tired these past 10 years. Demon King Pedinar, my train ticket to Earth. He wouldn't know just how eagerly I had anticipated this moment. Ha ha, hero. Those eyes longing for victory are truly to my liking. Very well. I shall accept humanity's challenge. Wait. There's something I want to ask before we fight, you see. Why is it that you merely stood by and watched the deaths of your subordinates? It was a question which I had constantly harbored for the past 10 years. The Demon King before me was the very person who had let me run amok as I liked. There would forever be no chance to ask this question if I didn't do so now. Demon King Pedinar frowned in response, his good humor soured. Merely stood by. How unpleasant. I have always dispatched stronger subordinates in order to take revenge. And they died. So I sent even stronger subordinates. And they died again. Hero, are you dissatisfied at having luckily survived? Demon King Pedinar rebuked in a dumbfounded tone. The way he looked at me as if I was truly foolish caused a burst of emotions in me. So I returned tit for tat without losing. If Demon King Nim acted in the beginning, I wouldn't have been able to reach this point. During the past 10 years, the Demon King had lost many things. The plan to overthrow the kingdom, the plot to assassinate a hero, loyal subordinates, an outstanding son, beautiful slaves, a first-rate elite demon legion, superior equipment, treasures that were piled up like a mountain, large territory. So many that even an account book wouldn't suffice to record them all. And each time he lost something grew stronger. My biggest sponsor wasn't humanity, but the Demon King. Hero, such speculations are meaningless. They aren't meaning. Do you know the politics of demons? Be silent otherwise. Words were futile with the Demon King. The question which I had harbored for 10 years couldn't be solved until the end. Every time I ventured into temples, labyrinths, ruins and the like that were prepared for the hero who would enter someday, there were no problems even without the power of friendship, which I never heard the end of. I was strong even without something to protect. My earnest goal of escaping this barbaric fantasy world and returning to the cultured citizen of Earth was enough motivation for me. Those 10 years of endurance didn't fail me. I didn't need trivial, cheap tricks. Hurrah, hero, does this mighty power of yours come from the rage of losing your comrades? No, it's the result of training. What rage would I be feeling when I was the one who killed them? Far from rage, I was feeling very refreshed. Is that so? In any case, it was an excellent fight. The eyes of Demon King Pedinar, who had lost in a pure head-on duel, in a clash of swords, closed slowly. I waited without letting go of my tension. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. But the dead Demon King didn't move an inch. There was no development of a consolation match that went along the lines of, "Now I'll face you for real. Are you for real? This is the end. Hello." Quote ellipsis quote. I had toiled for 10 years in order to defeat the Demon King. But it ended so simply like this. Looking at the Demon King's corpse, which was lying face down like a matchstick, curses rose to the tip of my tongue. I grew dispirited. Damn, they say the ignorant are fated to labor. A list of names of those bastards who had over-exaggerated the Demon King, who wasn't even all that, rose in my mind, but I decided to be understanding with a generous heart. Right now, it was a waste of time to even bother with them. I looked up toward the sky and shouted in a loud voice. "O God of the fantasy world, I have defeated the Demon King as promised. Please return me to Earth now." There was no use in regretting the past. I thought of the things that I was going to do after returning to Earth. Being a good son, dating, games, being a gourmand, the Olympics, going on a quest for justice. I waited to go back with an excited heart. "Hero Nim, has your adventure been enjoyable?" Yes. "So quickly send me to Ear." The path of a true hero is truly difficult. But there were countless bonds that encouraged you, who did not lose your hopes and dreams. From them you learned friendship and love, and after maturing together, with them you defeated the wicked Demon King at last. Congratulations truly. Shall we look at your grading now? Wait, grading. It was my first time hearing this. My intuition, which had never betrayed me, was ringing alarm bells, telling me that something strange was going on. Please check your report card carefully. Name, Kong Han Su. Combat power, S. Achievements, A. Reputation, D+. Character, F. Note, why the hell did you go and kill off your perfectly fine comrades? But they weren't perfectly fine. My comrades had meddled and imposed in everything in my life. Disregarding human rights and violence under the pretense of training were par for the course. There was even one crazy bitch who had revealed her birthday suit by her own negligence, then wielded a sword at me. If I were to make a list of the indignation and unreasonableness I went through in the past 10 years, there would really be no end to it. So that was a justified revenge. You have failed to pass. Reason. With great power follows equal responsibility. But you possess a character that does not suit the power you have. For the sake of the world's order and peace, you shall be returning to the first day of the test. Beginning retest. Return. Retest. What bullshit is this? No matter how arbitrary a god could get, this wasn't acceptable. Roll around again in this garbage dump that didn't even have flush toilets. The comrades I had done my best to kill were going to come back to life. The mere thought of it caused goosebumps to rise. A suspicious light enveloped my body. All of the teaching staff are praying for your success. You have been designated as a Blue Falcon hero. A specialist instructor will be dispatched. God damn. Chapter 2, with my instructor's qualification on the line. 10 years before I busted Demon King Pedinar's ass. There was a time when I was tender too. On that day, I was having a heated discussion with my high school friends. Boldly placed on top of the worn table which we were sitting around, were magazines about magical girls instead of textbooks. The girls in our class threw us rude looks that said, "Those idiots are at it again, but hobbies deserve to be respected." It was a healthy topic appropriate for those our age. I want to quit studying and go over to a fantasy world. I want to save a princess held captive by a demon king and marry her. Just a princess. I would go on an exciting adventure with beauties of various races in a fantasy world. Two of my friends argued hotly as they revealed their preferences. They declared that they would steal the women of other men like savages, and create a harem which was rejected in modern society. The gazes of the female students directed towards us changed from looking at idiots to looking at something below insects, but my two friends who were romantics of fantasy didn't notice in the least. And my other friend beside them couldn't be underestimated either. Adventure. How trifling. Is the history and science you learned just for show? Even world domination would be possible if you just invent a nuclear weapon. Someone with a 30 score in science would surely do well in making a nuclear weapon. When it comes to fantasy, it's gotta be a forbidden spell of the 10th circle. Wiping everything out in one shot. PFT. Magic. Spoken like a geek. The martial arts from a Muyop world are the real deal. Have you even heard of a sword master? The things they wanted to do in a fantasy world. The dreams and hopes my friends spouted as if boasting were all outrageous things. They carelessly spoke of them because they were delusions that would never happen, tantamount to the occult. Kong Han Su. What about you? The baton was passed over to me as I was scanning the popularity ranking for recent games printed in one of the magazines, absent-mindedly listening to my friends talk. I felt a silent pressure from their pointed stares. They seemed uncomfortable that I had continued to be quiet. What do I want to do in a fantasy world? I hadn't thought about it deeply before. Exploring Mars would be far more realistic instead. If possible, I would have liked it if they asked about some place I could go by car or plane, or in the worst case by spaceship. After all, if it's Mars, I might be able to set foot on it before I died of old age. The pointed stares of my friends gradually increased in intensity. Helplessly, I pondered on it for about 3 seconds before answering. My dream is. The gag trophy of that day became mine. It was a sweet memory before the day I was kidnapped to a fantasy world. Sweet my ass. Its expiry date was so past that the mold on it grew a flower. My dream. What's wrong about inventing a flush toilet? Even great emperors, pretty princesses, archmages and sword masters would crouch over a chamber pot or over grass and do their business all the same. It wouldn't be too late to consider childish dreams after that. Now, let's shove aside this miserable show of reminiscence, and confront the cruel reality that is without dreams or hopes. I was inside of an extremely familiar room. An arch-shaped dome enveloped in pure white marble. Instead of a white fluorescent light, a dim purple light from the lanterns hung on the walls illuminated the interior from all directions. On the floor there was a complicated picture drawn in the shape of a donut, but I involuntarily gnashed my teeth the moment I saw it. Hero Kidnapping Magic Circle. In fancy, professional terms, it was called a Dimension Transfer Magic Circle. I stood in its very center, and surrounding me as if to trap me in were men in silver armor. Palace Knights. They were the fantasy world equivalent of elite troops. Facing me, there wasn't a single palace knight who was nervous. And it couldn't be any other way, as right now I was in a high schooler's body, in no way comparable with those muscular builds of theirs like that of a bodybuilder. Ha, ha ha, I couldn't help but force a laugh. Palace Knights were no doubt the most elite bunch regardless of country, but for a long time there had been no one who held their heads up so straight like that in front of me. But after coming face to face with this unbelievable situation, I truly realized that I had lost the power I had built up over 10 years. My forearms, which had been thick as logs, had become as thin as dog bones. The rest of my body was just as pathetic. And the change wasn't limited to my body. My high-class equipment and items had all disappeared. The time I had invested and gathered them had become for nothing in just one return trip in time. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't Korea. This wasn't even on Earth. No matter how much I denied it, reality didn't change. But even so, the thought of so simply acknowledging it made my insides boil. It had been a whole 10 years, 10. If it had been someone else's life, then I could have said, oh. I see. You did your best in a dog shish *tty place for 10 years and passed over the matter indifferently. But the story changes when it comes to yourself. 10 years was an extremely long time. It was enough time for a frail kid to exercise hard, become chosen as a national representative and become a globally famous athlete. If one was to marry and start a family, it would be more than enough time to have your first child, and from a gurgling babe, see him off at his primary school entrance ceremony. 3 years in middle school, 3 years in high school, 4 years in college. They say if you study for these 10 years in total, the rest of your life becomes comfortable, but don't people play in spite of that? 10 years. 3,650 days. 87,600 hours. Throughout this long period of time I yearned to return to Earth for every single day. Especially on days when I received the scorn and disdain of my damned comrades. It wasn't enough that I was sent back in time, I was still in a fantasy world. How could I simply acknowledge this terrible reality? Welcome, Hero Nim. Quote. A sweet voice like that of an oriole woke my senses. The owner of that voice was a young woman donned in a pure white robe which emphasized the color theme of the environment. Hers was a face I knew. She was one of the comrades that was part of my dark history. But she wasn't able to accompany us up to the last boss, because in one of our adventures, she fell behind in escaping a collapsing ruin and was buried alive. On that day, I had held a toast by myself. I had thought I would never be seeing her again. Have you come to your senses? No. Returning in time, retesting. It wasn't a bad joke. Is that so? Hero Nim, please come to your senses soon. You're very confused at being summoned abruptly without even a warning, aren't you? This is Fantasia, a different dimension from the world where Hero Nim was born and raised in. It must be unreasonable to hope for you to immediately understand. I'll start explaining things one by one from now. Demon King Petinar woke up. Danger arrived for humanity. The Hero Nim of prophecy was summoned. Please save this world. She broke up what could have been simply summed up in 4 lines and turned it into a lengthy explanation. I was aware of all of it as I had come back in time. And that wasn't all. I had even busted the ass of Demon King Petinar, who put humanity at danger, and saw through the epilogue too. I wasn't a fool hero who came back in time because he died midway. Oh my, I forgot to introduce myself. I am Lenouvel. I am the archaeologist who received a prophecy in the middle of a journey of chasing the ancient legends, and summoned Hero Nim. Lenouvel means the truth in ancient language. Archaeologist Lenouvel, a genius mage who had both the looks and the talent. She was the scholarly type, so she was more specialized in supportive magic rather than combat magic, but, as befitting a tough explorer, her financial capability, ability to survive, stamina and the like were overall on the excellent side. It was just that. Don't smile so brightly. It bothers me. Wah. This bitch was the one behind everything. The main culprit who kidnapped me to this savage world. If I still had even 1% of my capability when I ripped a new one in the Demon King right now, I would have killed Lenouvel before anything else. She was a woman who was repulsive in whatever she did. That's what defined archaeologist Lenouvel. Stop pretending to be cute is what I'm saying. But I should acknowledge what should be acknowledged. The god who chose Lenouvel had an excellent eye. The me before going back in time who didn't know the future, let's call it the first episode me made a regretful decision when he was in the same situation I was in right now. And that was none other than to be enchanted by Lenouvel's good looks. In slight defense of myself, I was in my puberty back then. And Lenouvel was pretty. Her beauty was overwhelming to the point that the game character cosplaying professional female actor who I liked seemed like a squid in my memories in comparison. But not anymore. Lenouvel was as pretty as ever, but I had changed. I had come too far to fall for a beauty trap. Kidnapping someone who was living just fine and asking him for help. Do you find this situation amusing? Do you feel like bursting out in laughter just looking at my face? What a brainless truth like that name of yours, Lenouvel. Do you have a death wish? Lenouvel's gorgeous smile froze. Now that's more like it. I am sorry. Lenouvel, whose neck was shrunk back like a turtle, apologized in a crestfallen tone. But she wore a look that said she didn't know why the hero was being angry. The hero would save the world. In this fantasy world, it was common sense that was accepted as naturally as the harmony between yin and yang. The summoned hero would carry dreams and hopes and set off on an adventure. Every generation of heroes recorded in history books were all like that. Clank. I heard the metal sound of armor. Hero Nim, His Majesty awaits you. Had he been waiting for that noisy Lenouvel's mouth to become shut? One of the palace knights who had been waiting by the side relayed those words to me. Though Lenouvel had received the prophecy, she was only an assistant. The material cost, magic catalysts and the like that went into making this dimension transfer magic circle I was currently standing on would have been an impossible requirement if not for the support of an entire nation. In short, the kingdom was behind this. I'm also waiting. Why are you surprised? Well, that's. The incompetent palace knight who couldn't comprehend words asked what I meant. It was my fault for expecting too much of fellows who were muscle-heads through and through. I should explain in a way easy to understand. Think carefully. How many heroes are there in this world who can slay the Demon King? Only you. The palace knight immediately replied without much thought. Just as he said, I was the only hero. This body of mine was far more precious than a mere fantasy king that could be endlessly replaced by princes like car tires. This world would end if I died. You understand now, right? Let the king know that if he wants to meet me, stop testing the waters and come out quick. My time is expensive. If you've got a problem with that, then you lot can defeat the Demon King instead. Quote ellipsis quote. Quote ellipsis quote. All those present were struck speechless at my bizarre utterance. I bet they couldn't think of any words to retort with. Retort. There is an old saying, that no one would lower their heads before a hidden gem. Lower yourself, hero Nim. Those who raise themselves will fall lower, while those who lower themselves will rise. Modesty is a virtue, and at the same time, it allows one to distinguish oneself from the ordinary. A long line of nonsense was trying to lecture me. It wasn't clear as to whether this presumptuous lecture was from a voice or was a message. It was hard to tell as it was delivered directly inside my head. So who are you? Answer. A special instructor. It appears that you have received an F score for character. That is no easy feat either, but do not worry too much. It is for you that I was dispatched. I shall do my all to help you in being reborn as a respectable hero. With my instructor's qualification on the line. My God. Professor Morals reporting for duty in a fantasy world. Chapter 3. Begin self-study. Answer. It is understandable that student Kong Han Su is surprised. Heroes who have passed the test graduate without even knowing the existence of a special instructor, after all. Even if they fail to pass, most of the time they are made to quietly take a retest. The number of times the teaching staff get involved are so few as to be counted on a hand. Retest, as in going back in time. The protagonists who lived pathetically and died pathetically in regret. Without any reason they would go back to the past and make a new start. They wouldn't be told the reason for the return. Why? Explanation. The purpose is to have them reflect on their mistakes and correct them by themselves. There is a saying that people make mistakes faster than river water flowing into the sea. Everyone makes mistake, but student Kong Han Su is different. If only looking at the result, you succeeded. I had subjugated Demon King Petinar. Cleanly accomplished the role of a hero. Thoroughly exterminated the demons so that they could never again threaten the peace of humanity. I had even shattered the Demon King's soul so that he couldn't revive for eternity. It was a perfect conquest that didn't leave any room for future trouble. Conflicted, that is the problem. By rights, you who intentionally made mistakes repeatedly should have suffered the bitter taste of crushing defeat at the Demon King's hands. Yet you effortlessly won against him. Failure is said to be the mother of success. But you do not reflect on yourself because you did not fail. I could understand what was being said. Isn't this guy here to preach because I'm not repentant? Affirmative. Exactly. Good people are said to be like water. It is because water does not fight and is helpful to all things. I will be eagerly looking forward to student Kong Han Su becoming a deep and wide ocean who will care for his comrades. Locking horns with the Demon King seems easier. Laughter. This will be it for the theory, and the practical lesson begins from now. I shall be coming again around this time tomorrow. Work hard, comrade. This homework was a headache. Hero Nim, are you hurt somewhere? Gripping onto your head all of a sudden. Dimensional transfer is a magic that still hasn't been tested. There might be an unknown side effect, so please let me know if a problem occurs in your body. Lenouvel had been no more than a cat's paw. The mastermind who had ordered her to kidnap me had appeared. Professor Morals. I did remember that right after defeating the Demon King, I had received a one-sided notice that a special instructor would be dispatched. But I hadn't taken it seriously as it had been much too absurd. Yet to think it was real. All of the teaching staff, is it? I surmised that they were a group of instructors who trained heroes. Like how students who liked to play were locked up at school or in an academy to study all day, could they be kidnapping ordinary folk to this savage world and raising them into warriors under the name of hero? I couldn't tell the goal of this organization, but it was certain they had no malice or hostility towards me. Otherwise, there was no way I would still be alive like this out in the open. These people were capable of effortlessly sending me, someone who had demolished the Demon King, to the past. If they became displeased, they would be able to kill the likes of me anytime. As such, I decided to cooperate for now. Until I managed to find a clear plan to oppose them. Lenouvel, lead the way to the king. Professor Morals said that modesty was a virtue, did he? While I could understand what he was trying to get at, that was a one-dimensional approach. This was a fight between the king and I too. Hold the initiative. I was neither a citizen of this country, nor did I have the obligation to obey a kidnapper. I was no hunting hound. I wasn't a free volunteer either. I was going to fight for my fair rights as a human. I wasn't going to submit to the likes of a ruler who would only sit on his throne, nodding his head and ordering, fight against the demons with your life. It was just that, since I wouldn't be able to return to Earth if this world was destroyed, I planned on reaching an adequate point of compromise like the relationship between a worker and his employee. Professor Morals' words had a point as well. Although I liked a fight for initiative where it was obvious I would win, wouldn't showing a beautiful appearance of conceding first as a cultured person of Earth also a worthy approach? I thus decided to go over myself first. Hero Nim, it's this way. Lenouvel had been stamping her feet under her robe, at a loss on what to do. Her face had brightened upon hearing that I would go meet the king on my side. Apparently, it was her first time meeting a hero like me. The expressions of the palace knight which had been stiff as stone gradually eased as well. After all, they who lived on honor and pride had the stable job of protecting maidens and the king. The romantics of the fantasy world. Regrettably, they weren't on the hero's side. Hero Nim, please watch your words before His Majesty. A palace knight asked me this as he intimidatingly looked down on me. Imagine it. Imagine yourself surrounded by large men the size of German tanks, Russian brown bears. It wouldn't be strange if your heart shriveled in on itself. What are you glaring at? You gonna hit me? But that wasn't enough to make me cower. I was the hero Nim. The only hope of taking down Demon King Pedinar. If I were to die or didn't cooperate, this fantasy world would be ravaged by the Demon King and ultimately fall into ruin. That's why these men didn't have the guts to beat up the hero. As long as I was careful of that guy who didn't care for the likes of humanity's future. Ooh, hero, good spirit. Wait, this voice couldn't be. I'll hit you as you wish. Laughing heartily, a giant who was about a head taller than the palace knights, who had the large frame of bodybuilders, came charging over. I couldn't react at all. A fist the size of a stone pot lid came flying at my face. I'm gonna die. That was the only thought in my mind. The me at the end of the first episode would have easily dodged it, but right now I had the crappy body of a high schooler which couldn't even avoid a fast pitch of a baseball. Why did this bastard appear here? It was a miscalculation. I was complacent. Whoosh. The giant's fist grazed past the rim of my left ear. Had it surpassed the speed of sound? A fierce wind blasted by my eardrums a beat later. The inside of my head buzzed as my ears rang. Blood trickled out of my ears, perhaps my eardrums had bursted. Mr. Alex, are you planning on killing Hero Nim? Lenouvel scolded the giant with a face drained of color. But the giant who was reprimanded passed it off with a laughter as if it were nothing. Ha ha, it's a test of courage, I tell you, a test of courage. Look, he isn't dead, right? Quote ellipsis quote. Yes, this was what I didn't like. These savages would kidnap innocent people and use violence on them. They would set you on a pedestal calling you, Hero Nim, but they would actually treat you lower than a human. Like hunting hound or toy to be disposed of after use. But it was going to be different this time. Professor Morals, this is self-defense. Talk. I took a step with my right foot to the giant's side and slightly bowed my hips. I thrust my right hand inside the left pocket of my pants. Inside the pocket, as I had expected, was a mechanical pencil. Although it couldn't be compared to fangs or blades, the 0.3 mm mechanical pencil I had used in my school days could be considered quite sharp. Sharp enough to use as a weapon. I was in an unstable posture with my torso lowered and the center of my weight leaning forwards, but I didn't panic and use that momentum like an athlete. It was too crude to be called Iaido, my body wasn't capable of performing the technique. But still the deftness of my hand was in a different league compared to laymen. I was different from a lenient instructor of a kendo club who had never killed a person before. I was a hero with 10 years of experience. I had confidence when it came wounding others. With my murderous intent hidden like an assassin, I stuck close to the giant in a natural manner and blocked his lower vision. I then swung the mechanical pencil in my hand. I would have aimed for his heart or waist had I had a proper blade, but there was only one part that could be injured on this giant whose skin was hard like stone. This punk. The giant retreated in fright. My surprise attack had been perfect, but his movement was swift despite his lateness in noticing it. Re-up. My 0.3mm mechanical pencil only managed to rip a straight line down the crotch of the giant's pants. Regretfully enough, there had been no sensation of tearing flesh. It didn't work out as I wanted because my body was slow, even though it would have been a success had I recovered even 1% of first episode me's physical abilities. Pity. I had unfortunately failed in turning him into a eunuch. It wasn't simply on the level of taking revenge. I strongly felt that, of all people, I could never lose to this giant at least. He could be counted among the top 5 in terms of those whom I harbored the most resentment towards. Sword King Alex. In the first episode, 5 days after having an audience with the king, I met Alex for the first time in an orientation that took place in the royal training grounds. And I was beaten like a dog by him from the first day. Under the excuse of practical training. But in this second episode, because I made a commotion without panicking, it seemed I had drawn his interest early. For starters, he was my teacher in swordsmanship as well. Mr. Alex quickly apologized to Hero Nim. Lenouvel, whose face had become beet red, yelled loudly. Alex, who had become just as red in the face, protested as he pointed with both hands at the ripped crotch of his pants. Lenouvel, look at this. I suffered too. Just what do you want me to look at? Speechless, Alex shot daggers at me, the culprit. But he shrunk back when Lenouvel, who stood beside me, opened her eyes wide in a glare. Coup. An assassin with a frail body like that. Interesting. Very well, damned hero. If you best me, Palace Knight Captain Alex, I will officially kneel before you and apologize. I promise you this upon my honor as a knight. Lies. He didn't apologize even until the moment of his death. Swear on your 2 balls. Don't get cheeky. Alex left the scene growling like an injured tiger, looking ridiculous with both his hands covering the crotch of his pants. Watching his retreating figure, a slight change came across my way of thinking. Returning in time, I got the thought that it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Perhaps it was a divine revelation that I should release the stress that had piled up in the first episode as much as I wanted. There was a saying that if you can't avoid it, enjoy it. No. I felt dizzy as if seasick. Alex's test of courage hadn't only ruptured my eardrums. It was certain that either the semicircular canal or vestibular organ in the deepest region of my ear had been affected. These 2 organs maintained the body's sense of equilibrium. If they malfunctioned, it would feel like the world is turning upside down. Hero Nim, I will heal you with magic. I was swaying where I stood when Lenouvel lightly grabbed my right arm and supported me with her slim body. She was pretending to truly worry about me. It's fine. Coldly shaking off Lenouvel's hand, I closed my eyes and focused my mind. It was without a doubt that I had lost all my abilities upon coming back in time. But that wasn't a cause enough for me to become weak. Turning my 10 years of effort into nothing. How truly laughable. The flow of blood from my ruptured eardrums abruptly ceased. My posture became stabilized as the dizziness stopped as well. Hero Nim, what kind of power is that? Having noticed my subtle changes, Lenouvel asked with round eyes that sparkled with curiosity. Even though I had warned her just now to not act cute. Are you curious? Yes. I'll specially explain just this one time, so clean your ears and listen well. Thank you. I organized my thoughts once, and then opened my lips to speak. After manually activating the autonomous nervous system in the human body, you fix the damaged semicircular canals. How do you know it's the semicircular canals, you ask? If something had gone wrong with the otolith of the vestibular organ, the world would have felt like it was tilting, but it only looked like the world was spinning around me where I stood. That means a problem had occurred in the lymph, the sensory hair or sensory cell of the semicircular canals. Now, since we've understood the cause, what comes next is simple. You temporarily cut off the auditory nerve that is sending wrong sensory information to the cerebellum, and if you concentrate on raising the natural healing ability of the semicircular canals, ta-da! Oh my, it's already healed. It's simple after listening about it, isn't it? Lenouvel stood there blinking her eyes, having utterly failed to understand. What was the point in explaining about it in detail to an inhabitant of a fantasy world who didn't even know about microscopes and anatomical charts? Like talking to a brick wall. But the theme of today was modesty. I consoled her with a benevolent smile on my face. It's fine if you don't know. It has no effect on life. Woo. Lenouvel pouted as she pretended to be cute again. But this time I went over it without scolding her. Before I realized it, we had arrived at our destination. A palace knight cried out in a resonant voice. Your Majesty, the hero requests an audience. I never requested an audience. Although I wanted to tie up these bastards who treated me as an inferior as they pleased like dried corvinas and toss them into the sea, I decided to establish friendly relations for now. I turned up the corners of my mouth into a beaming smile. Professor Morals had told me to become an ocean. It was a good metaphor. I'll become an ocean and drown the lot of you. Chapter 4, Show Me the Money. It was a downright lie that the king and nobles were waiting for me. I was well aware that they had hurriedly begun readying themselves only after hearing news that the dubious hero summoning had succeeded. Right about now they should be quietly making their entrances through the back. Otherwise, there was no reason for me to be waiting for a long time in front of the door. Hero Nim, are you listening? An old noble asked me politely. Yeah, you will soon be having an audience with His Majesty the King. So please refrain from making such light remarks as before in front of His Majesty. Just how many times are you saying this? I get it, I tell you. It is because saying it so many times is still not enough. Really, have you lived a life of being deceived or what? After parting ways with Alex, whom I wanted to kill even more than Demon King Pedinar, I had walked for a long while through the palace corridors until arriving at an antique-looking entrance. In front of that entrance, it felt like I had been listening to this strict-looking old noble go on about things I needed to take note of for about an hour. Knock knock. I heard a small noise from the other side of the door. A signal that the preparations had ended. You have achieved a satisfying standard in the etiquette I have taught you. It is now fine to enter. There's etiquette on standing like a block of stone too. KRHM. The old noble who had argued with me for a whole hour turned his head to the side and coughed dryly, perhaps feeling ashamed. Even from how I saw it, he had done his best. He had dragged out time, entertaining the hero using reasons and false excuses, until the king and nobles hurried their heavy asses and entered through the back door. Since I didn't feel bored thanks to him, I decided to feign ignorance. Creak. The great doors slowly opened. A worn audience chamber that told of the kingdom's history and age came into view. The first thing that caught my attention was the high dais at the very end of the chamber. I welcome your arrival in my lands. Hero, a middle-aged man, who had a yellow face and looked like a garnished dumpling, stood up in an exaggerated manner from his throne and welcomed me with arms spread wide. He was the king of this country. Although he was said to be a battle-mongering figure who had often set out for the battlefields in his younger days, now he was just a dumpling wearing a crown. There was a long line of irritating faces on display within the audience chamber. The prince, princess, queen, nobles, knights, magicians. I already knew about the ominous dark clouds that hung over this country, but I didn't even have a bit of inclination to give them the precious gem-like information from the first episode, much less solve what was to come. Hero Nim, you were in the presence of His Majesty the King. A palace knight surreptitiously hinted at me to quickly give my greetings. In the first episode one had given a respectful greeting, though it wasn't received that well. Now, was because I knew the future. I couldn't feel the need to get into the good graces of the dumpling king who would be assassinated in the near future. But the theme of today was modesty. I decided to play along with the other side for now. I thank your hospitality, your majesty. I greeted the king in the etiquette of this country which I had to learn even though I hated it. But, I didn't overdo my bow in the least. Was he satisfied by my submissive attitude? A smile sprouted on the king's face like a blooming flower. The many people of power I had met on political matters in the first episode had managed their expressions well, yet this king was truly an exception among exceptions. His face was excessively honest. To put it kindly, he was kindly, but to judge him normally he was incompetent. The nobles observing me whispered among themselves, "There's discipline in his movements. His etiquette is even more excellent than that son of mine." I had imagined an ignorant barbarian. Memories of the first episode flitted through my mind. The days of humiliation when I was called a barbarian who didn't know manners by these savages. But it wasn't like that this time. 10 years of experience in a fantasy world. I had grasped the etiquette and culture of all countries and races. Though I hadn't studied them because I liked them. The face of the king whose mood had become good was even brighter compared to our meeting in the first episode. His face became like a tasty-looking king dumpling as the corners of his lips rising on both sides caused his cheeks to swell. The king turned to look at Lenouville and spoke. "You have worked hard, archaeologist Lenouville. I am honored, your majesty." After giving her a short compliment, the king once again seated himself on the throne, and then threw me a question with a voice full of expectation. "Hero, are you able to see your abilities?" It was called status in English. Putting aside that the dumpling king's voice was a little gentler than the last time, things were playing out just as it had in the first episode. Status abilities existed in this fantasy world. It was made so that your own development index could be understood at a glance, generously indicated in words and numbers. Just like a hologram from a virtual reality game. Race, Archhuman. Level, 1. Job, Hero Experience 500%. Skills, Interpretation A, Fortitude F, Assassination F. Status, Good. When repeating a certain action or situation it would become a skill. And by raising proficiency the skill rank would rise and its efficiency and power would increase. Interpretation A was given as a starter in the first episode as well, but the Fortitude F and Assassination F next had to be a result of Sword King Alex's test of courage. Although I was aware of it, each look at the status window prompted a bitter laugh out of me. From level to skills, everything had been cleanly reset. I can see it very clearly, your majesty. Level 1, and my job as hero. Ooh, can you tell the perk of a hero? It is a 500% experience bonus. 500%. Not only the king, but everyone in the surroundings was shocked. And how could they not be? This meant that I would be able to grow stronger 5 times faster than others regardless of talent. If I were to repeat something for an hour, it would be the same as having done it for 5 hours. An overpowered perk befitting a hero of legend. Hero Nim. A 500% experience bonus is a truly amazing thing. Okay, it is not flattery but the truth. Lenouville made a fuss at my lukewarm response. She continuously harped on by the side, trying to make me realize the worth of a 500% experience bonus no matter what. That was why I was about to tell her to shut up for a bit, but in that moment the king abruptly shot up from his throne and shouted in a strong voice with both his arms held high. "O chosen hero, danger is upon this country which lies near the territory of demons. I beseech you to slay the demons, raise your status abilities, and defeat Demon King Pedinar." This country was swathed in countless problems. A fight of succession between the princes, a high noble in cahoots with a demon, the queen who was hooked into a cult, the disappearance of village maidens, a freakish serial killer, famine, epidemic. So many problems to the point of dizziness. I did a rapid calculation in my mind, excluding the worthless problems which would only end in one word of thanks. I picked out only the tasks that would raise my combat power or give monetary benefits. These kinds of jobs were truly so few that they could be counted on a hand. The king put the blame on the territory of demons, failing to see the reality, but this country had an overwhelming number of internal issues, unrelated to demons. The Demon King was an extremely scrupulous gentleman. He didn't know to come empty-handed. He never failed to take care of my reward each time I slew his subordinates. Sometimes it had been too much to the point of making me feel troubled. In short, at this rate I wouldn't be able to work due to being unable to make ends meet. Your Majesty, about how much support will you give me? Support. The Dumpling King tilted his head in confusion. I summoned you, the hero. Our kingdom has given the ultimate support in order to save humanity. What more could we do? We've dragged over the hunting hound. The hunting hound will solve the problem on its own. That's what the Dumpling King was saying. Then I refuse. Find some other hero instead. What? They were all astonished. Those expressions please me. Crisis of this country. Ain't my business. You lot got a lousy way of treating a hero. Giving an order in a situation where it's not enough to beg on your knees. Look here, Dumpling King. I'm not a citizen of this kingdom. Wretch, how dare you, to His Majesty. One of the nobles flared up. And I returned his outburst with my mechanical pencil. Ack. The noble whose forehead was embedded with the 0.3 mm mechanical pencil let out a short scream and tumbled down from his chair. This was me having shown enough mercy as it was. The pencil would have gone through his skull had my strength been sufficient. And if I had chosen to be vicious, I would have aimed for his eye sockets instead of his hard forehead. Sheeing, sheeing, sheeing. The palace knights who were startled by my thrown mechanical pencil drew their swords in unison. They held me at sword point from all sides so that I wouldn't be able to move. But that was all they did. Why don't you kill me if you can? I began to walk slowly. A nick was made on my neck by one of the blades being held at me and blood trickled down, but I paid it no mind and walked towards the throne. The point of that sword failed to go any deeper. It wasn't because my skin and bones were hard. Crazy. The frightened palace knights were moving their swords aside on their own. They had surrounded me, threatening me with their blades, yet failed to cut off a single finger of mine. They were tense, dripping with cold sweat. I spoke in a merry tone. If a king dies, the prince can replace him. If even that prince is lost, then the princess will do, and if there is no princess then a relative. Then, who will replace the hero if he dies? How will you take the head of the demon king? My whole body was covered in cuts from all four sides, not only my neck. Hot blood flowed out of my wounds, but that didn't daunt me in the least. These savages weren't worth treating with modesty. They were pigs who would crawl all over you if left alone. The palace knights who had fallen into disorder wore dark looks. There was no palace knight who wished for their beloved family and lover to be killed or violated by the demons in the near future, except for great men like Alex who didn't care about the world. He was the only one I needed to watch out for. I was being bold with my experience in the first experience. I knew that these people could never kill me. It wasn't of my concern whether this fantasy world went to hell or not. But if I died in these lands, there was no guarantee whether I would be revived or things would restart like a game. I was also afraid of death. But I was the victor in this psychological battle. Your Majesty, do you have any more words for me? Politics was a contest of spirit. The one with the bigger voice would always win. Hero, I have summoned you in order to protect these lands. I had ordered the purchase of magic catalysts from many nobles and merchants, and commanded Lenouvel to call you unto this land. So, you belong to our kingdom. So the Dumpling King declared. His logic was one that I truly couldn't even laugh at. I'm not a fish. The owner of a fish is the fisherman who caught it, but I'm a hero. Belonging to your kingdom. What a riot. Announce that to the world, why don't you? See how this kingdom will end up. The nobles began to make a commotion, the two princes who were aiming for the crown included. The queen, who had been hooked into a cult that worshipped an inferior demon, looked like she had many things to say, but she didn't speak up thoughtlessly. An atmosphere that was to my liking. It was here that I dropped a statement in a tone of finality. I am going to leave for a country that will favorably treat a hero. It's no use even if you stop or imprison me. I won't even twitch a finger. The moment the truth comes out that you oppressed the hero, hope of humanity, that will be the end of this country's fate. That includes the rest of you who supported the foolish king. The nobles and knights who had been listening swallowed their breaths. Hero, what sort of support do you wish for? The Dumpling King, who had become nervous, shouted. He didn't ask for the opinions of his loyal subjects or the high-ranking officials, tacitly thrusting forth a blank check first. It was no different from declaring surrender. High-quality food, clothing and accommodation, equipment, potions, military map, diplomatic immunity, room service. Room service. This. I shyly waved my pinky finger. Quote ellipsis quote. And your majesty, is there still more, O hero? The face of the king, whose forehead had already gained more wrinkles in this short span of time, was as sorry-looking as a steamed dumpling that had fallen to the ground, though I still had no intention of letting him off. Show me the money. A role-playing game that you had cleared once already was bound to be boring. Let's key in the cheat code and walk only on a flowery path. Chapter 5, I've got 8th grader syndrome. Incredulous, I did not expect for you to cause an incident again in just one day. Have you heard of the saying that a wounded wild boar will oink ceaselessly? The king who has paid a material price will continue to make requests of you. Greed rots your soul, Professor Morals. I think the corruption has gone too far. Sigh, a bad compromise is better than a good lawsuit. There are times when you must endure a loss even when you can win. If I had enough time I would watch over you by your side, but the influx of students is keeping me too busy. A day had passed since I struck a deal with the king. Although the injuries all over my body were healed with Lenouvel's magic, there was nothing that could be done about my anemia, so I was lying down in a luxurious room as if passed out. Still, my bloody struggle had borne fruit. I had gained a hero activity fund, a splendid feat that was impossible in the first episode. But in any case, students. Explanation. The owner of a mill thinks that wheat only grows so that his mill will turn. Student Kong Han Soo. You are not the only hero candidate. There have been quite a few graduates already. The heroes who have safely returned to Earth are living happily while helping their neighbors in need. Professor Morals only left the words, "Try harder," before going away. Today's conversation came as a significant shock to me. I'm the mill owner. It turns out I had 8th grader syndrome. The world didn't revolve around me as the center. It wasn't only the Korean Kong Han Soo, who had crossed over to a fantasy world. The countless promising 8th graders of Earth were being raised into heroes, using huge practical rooms each. An educational facility on a dimensional scale meant for one person. The magnitude of it was so ludicrous that I couldn't keep up with the reality of it. Hero Nim. Is there something troubling you? Lenouvel, who had been sticking to my side all day long starting from yesterday except when sleeping, asked me with her head tilted to the side. Lenouvel, is it certain that I'm the only hero summoned to these lands? Yes, it's certain. Professor Morals had said he was busy because of the influx of students. That even at this very moment, countless heroes were in the middle of a journey to slay Demon King Petinar. But the hero of this world was me alone. That being the case, parallel worlds. Could it be that there existed as many fantasy worlds identical to this one as the number of students? Like an offline role-playing game that is enjoyed alone. The ludicrous scale of all this became even more nonsensical to me. My head throbbed with pain, so for the time being I put that train of thought on hold. I decided to think on how to return to my home planet a day sooner. Those graduates were said to have returned to Earth and were living happy and well. There was no rule saying that I couldn't do the same. Lenouvel, follow me. I received a whole bunch of gold coins from the Dumpling King. The king, who had felt a sense of crisis at hearing that the hard-summoned hero would be leaving, had opened wide the national treasury to try and gain my goodwill even if by using money. But, a condition came along with it. Wow, just how much is all this? There must be no one in the history of heroes who saved humanity that loved money as you do, Hero Nim. You're really amazing. SSH. Lower your voice will you? People are giving us strange looks. The Dumpling King had entrusted the money bag with archaeologist Lenouvel, who was expected to become the hero's comrade. I would have done the same myself had I been the king. Hero Nim, I want to have that magic orb, is it all right to buy it? I've always really wanted to have it. It seemed that the Dumpling King had chosen the wrong person to watch over me. I sneaked a glance at the price tag and then said, "Buy it." It wasn't my money. Woohoo, thank you. The place me and Lenouvel were walking in was the kingdom's hub of economic activity, the great market of the capital. The prices here were staggering in equal proportion to high quality and expensive tax of the products that were frequently stocked. Even among them, in particular, the magic tools containing magic which were exclusive to fantasy worlds were luxury goods whose price tag humbled even nobles. Magic wands, magic orbs, magic powders, magic brooms, magic. At any rate, anything with the word magic in it would unconditionally become expensive, just like how the phrase cutting-edge technology was well received on Earth. Lenouvel ran into the shop, her mood brightened at my consent. Afterwards, she came out hugging with both arms an orb the size of her own head. She was wearing an extremely happy face. At the sight of her like this, the youths passing by on the street stared vacantly. Lenouvel, hurry up and follow. Yes, Hero Nim. I gave a click of my tongue and called her over with a gesture as if beckoning to a puppy. This was all for the sake of those ignorant youths. They appeared to be dazzled by the detestable Lenouvel, but you needed to at least be a wealthy high noble in order to cope with the expenditures of this young, genius mage. A date or two and the pillar of your household would be pulled out entirely. Currently, my outfit was perfectly fantasy style. The reason for this change was partly because the uniform I had been previously worn was reduced to tatters by the palace knights, but mainly because in the first episode, I had drawn unnecessary interest and trouble by boldly strutting down this street in uniform. I wouldn't do such a stupid thing now. That, and I had become used to wearing fantasy-style clothing in my 10 years spent in this world. This didn't mean that I liked it though. Fluttering sleeves, tight stockings, long collars, peacock feather hat, pumpkin pants that was tight in the crotch, crimson shoes, shiny floral pattern. It was fashion terrorism with unknown origins. However, what an extraordinarily splendid attire. A noble, and a distinguished one at that. Is he the son of some amazing family? The people of the kingdom who mistook me for a noble didn't cause trouble for me. Even 10 lives wouldn't be enough if you made a wrong move in front of a noble, after all. The reason why I couldn't see any males spouting cliché lines like, "Sonny boy, I'll spare you if you leave behind the pretty thing by your side and get lost," upon seeing Lenouvel tagging along right beside me was also something along those lines. In short, it was a good environment for shopping. By the way, Hero Nim. Where are you going? You're not even giving a glance at famous smithies and herb shops. It's your first time here, isn't it, Hero Nim? The black market. Wah, I'm begging you please, but shut up a little. Because of you, people are looking at me strangely as well when I'm normal. Her neck shrunk back like a turtle, Lenouvel retorted timidly. But isn't it the black market? For the righteous Hero Nim to get involved in illegal auctions, it's only natural to be surprised. Lenouvel, yes. The magic orb you just bought is illegal too. She had bought that orb out of her own self-interest. While I was the one who approved it, she was the one who didn't refuse and went for it. In other words, we were partners in crime. Hero Nim, I've thought it over carefully, but I think the black market also seems fine as long as it helps in achieving peace for humankind. Deadly venoms are used in medicine too, right Tilda? Lenouvel switched attitudes like the flip of a hand. If you've understood, then come along quietly. Yes, but how will you find the black market? Even I've only heard rumors of it despite having lived here for a long time. They say it's hard to find because the auction location always changes. It was a sharp question. No, perhaps it was only natural to ask. It would be plenty suspicious for a fledgling hero who had only just entered a fantasy world to be more knowledgeable than a local. What kind of excuse can I cook up? Who am I? The chosen Hero Nim. Then think carefully. Would a hero be a hero if he was ordinary? If it was possible to defeat the Demon King with just a 5 times experience bonus perk, those dragons and fairies that have lived for millennia would have long taken him out. If that's the case. As intelligent as she was, befitting of an archaeologist, a subtle change came over Lenouvel's gaze. Listen well. The truth worth of the hero who will slay the Demon King isn't shown in status abilities. Amazing. If you've got it, then stop talking back and shut up for a bit. Woo. I made my way towards the pub I had frequented in the first episode. As the place of gathering for the black market would always change, just as Lenouvel had said, even the great me had no way of knowing where it would take place. Of course, as I had been a regular patron of the black market, I remembered several of the locations. But this time round, the time to visit the black market was moved up greatly thanks to the Dumpling King's funding. I needed new information, from none other than this place. Creak. I pushed aside the sliding door with rusted tracks and entered the shabby pub. I took in at a glance the interior of this establishment, which was illuminated by lanterns and a fireplace. The various voices of the customers who had come before us overlapped one another. Just slam down. You're dead if you lose, hear me. Ho ho. And then, a glass of beer for one here. No, make that two. The noisy cries from the fellows who were making bets on arm wrestling, the coquettish laughter of young ladies seducing men, the bard playing a guitar in the corner, the female worker quickly serving glasses of alcohol. It was just as how I remembered it. Very slowly, I stepped inside as I savored the nostalgia of the past. Wary glances were thrown at me from all sides. Although the atmosphere didn't grow cold at my appearance, it was without a doubt that something in the air had changed, because I was a newcomer and a noble. Although I felt inwardly disappointed at the attitudes of the pub folks, which had become different from the first episode, I paid it no mind and walked up to the bartender. The bartender, who had been wiping a glass, spoke to me first. This lowly one's eyes are delighted that your lordship has come to this shabby pub together with an amazing beauty. What will you order? Though our establishment seems old on the outside, we deal in all liquor that are traded within the kingdom. His manner of speech was as smooth as flowing water. Although his eyes that were shaped like a rattlesnake's gave off a sharp impression, his amiable smile, well-groomed mustache and immaculately white suit made up for this. Just as I remembered him in the first episode. I called out the name of my dear friend, the bartender. Tony. Does your lordship know of me? Quite well. The great hero would go around defeating the forces of evil. The things that were also considered evil were the smugglers who dealt in shady goods like slaves or drugs, the merchants who circulated them, as well as the customers who desired those goods. This was commonly known as dark commerce. In the first episode, the hero's party destroyed much of the dark dealings spread throughout this fantasy continent and found out a lot of passwords and locations of secret hideouts. By no means was it a pleasant adventure. I had lost friends who were all right along the way. Race, human. Level, 54. Job, assassin in nighttime, right pointing arrow, concealment up pointing arrow. Skills, stealth D, tracking E, business E, concealment E, cleaning F. Status, tense. Tony was a former assassin. He, who had opened a pub after retiring, was a friend who had taught me the way to live in this savage world when I was lost. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was my spiritual mentor. While I wanted to form a good relationship with him this time as well, like in the first episode, the bothersome Lenouvel was present, and I hadn't come here to rekindle a past friendship. I spoke in the language of promise that was only used in the black market. Tony, has some stock of good liquor arrived today? I will accommodate you a little if you give me a price you would like. All right. I had been worried about what I would do if the language of promise was different, as the timing was too early, but it turned out I was fretting for naught. I inwardly yelled out in delight as I continued the conversation. Tony, don't make me speak thrice. Hut. This lowly one has been rude. Lenouvel, who was sitting beside me with her buttocks firmly against her seat, cluelessly whispered, Hero Nim. You've only spoken once, but I cleanly ignored her. The first time was the question, second time his name. 3 times in total. Your lordship has good fortune. Black Dragon, a 27-year-old stout that came in today. The flavor will be even better if taken with roast mutton. The liquor that came in today. This would reveal the time and place of the next black market. For instance, if Tony were to say that some good liquor came in 2 days ago, it could be interpreted as, it will open 2 days later. And the 27-year-old Black Dragon pointed to the exact location of the black market. In addition to this, the promised location could completely change depending on the serving bartender's expression and position. Today. That is so. You wouldn't have already opened the bottle, right? It would be better to aim for the next auction if it had already begun. If that were the case, I would have introduced another liquor. Ah, I apologize. I'm quite the suspicious fellow, you see. Tony, one more question while I'm at it. Is the quality of mutton good? Roast mutton. This meant that the main product of this time's black market were slaves. Although they were hard to find on Earth where democracy and ideas of equality were prevalent, slaves were quite commonly traded in this savage world. The laws slightly differed by the region, but most countries prohibited the enslavement of humans aside from prisoners of war. Hence, it was illegal. You can look forward to it. Tony replied in a tone full of confidence. Bluffs and exaggerations were extremely dangerous in this line of business, which was why it was safe to objectively consider that the slaves to be auctioned in the upcoming black market would be of good quality. This was very satisfying news to me. I'll keep the order as is, mutton for 2. Mutton for 2. I will prepare it at once. I reserved 2 seats for the illegal auction of darkness. Chapter 6, Ding Dong. Ding Dong. After leaving the gloomy pub, we made our way towards the black market's promised location at a slightly quick pace. Originally we had time to spare, but owing to Lenouvel saying eating mutton by itself would be greasy and additionally ordering salad and so on, we were held back quite a bit. Having eaten her fill to satisfaction, Lenouvel fixed a stare on my face. What? Hero Nim, do you know that bartender? Tony, I know him well. He was a wonderful friend who taught me about women and survival of the fittest back when I was an innocent high schooler. I would have opened a business together with him had I not been a hero. How did you know his name? 'Cause I'm a hero. Although former assassin Tony was a true friend whom I knew well in the first episode, that didn't mean I had lied to Lenouvel previously. The perk of a hero wasn't just the 5 times bonus experience. I was capable of freely seeing the status abilities of others. I had wondered as to why only I could see them, but I realized why after listening to Professor Morrell's talk. It was a form of consideration so that the hero candidate wouldn't be unable to distinguish between the weak and the strong, throwing themselves at a powerful foe from the start and dying a dog's death. This ability was still in effect in the second episode as well. Wow, then can you see my abilities as well? Of course. Level 200. Race, human. Level, 200. Job, scholar. Knowledge equals sorcery up pointing arrow. Skills, magic A, sorcery A, charm B, cooking B, eternal youth C. Status, interested. Level 200. It couldn't even compare to the weakest underling of Demon King Pedinars. But because Lenouvel's skill ranks were on the extremely high end, her potential alone could be appraised as remarkable. Relatively speaking, the skill ranks of common folk were extremely low. To give an idea, race, human. Level, 8. Job, thief during daytime right pointing arrow fortune down pointing arrow. Skills, sight E, escape F, murder F. Status, nervous. This was about the standard an average person would achieve upon reaching adulthood. Like this young man who was stealthily stretching out his hand toward the money bag hung by Lenouvel's waist, not to mention their skills, even their levels were very much pathetic. And they would remain that way until they died. Ah, Lenouvel let out a short scream. At the same time I made my move as well. Not even looking towards the panicking Lenouvel, I pushed out my left foot to the left as if by reflex. Talk. The thief tripped over my foot and crashed to the ground. But the thief who hadn't let go of the money bag he stole quickly tried to get up. Still, I was faster this time as well. I kneed the thief in the small of his back and pressed down, in the spot between the 4th and 5th lumbar vertebrae where a herniated disc was most prone to occur. Waist pain would be a given if not treated in time, and daily life would become difficult due to numbing of the legs. It was one of the spots I liked to target. Ho-oh, aren't you quite a tenacious one? The young thief whose face was twisted in pain didn't loosen his right hand which was holding onto the money bag. He wildly waved around his empty left hand in resistance. If, at this point, this thief had decisively given up the money bag, then there would have been a chance for him to run away from me. The thief was level 8, his physical abilities were superior to what I had as a level 1. However, his greed brought disaster upon himself. I delivered a forceful knife hand strike to the band of the thief's neck. It was an action I had repeated over the past 10 years to the point of tediousness, murder. Crack. I heard the appalling sound of neck bone breaking. I had struck the spot between the 6th and 7th cervical vertebrae, where students and office workers who would sit for long periods of time would be frequently afflicted with cervical herniated discs. You needed to take good care of your neck unless you wanted to suffer numb arms and stiff shoulders. Though this thief wouldn't be able to look after himself, ever. That was clean. Not a drop of blood had stained my clothes, much less a speck of dust. The nobles and the wealthy would be crowding to the black market from now, so it wouldn't be good for appearances to have blood on me. Lenouvel spoke as she picked up the money bag. Hero Nim seems to be familiar with killing. A bit. It had seemed idiotic, so I gave up counting from the 100th murder I committed. I wasn't the strange one. There were truly many killers in this savage world, the reason being that rarely was there a man who hadn't experienced one war in their lifetime. That's why the average level of adult men was level 3. On the other hand, the majority of women were level 1 regardless of age. Returning to the previous subject. The young thief I had killed was level 8, far beyond the average level 3 of adult men. Where could he have secured so much experience points? I wondered. From his skill set, he neither appeared to be a former hunter nor soldier. I reached an answer immediately. It meant the young thief was a wicked person who had murdered dozens of innocent civilians. Though the story would be different if he had the job of hero, like me. Race, arch-human. Level 4. Job, hero, 500% experience bonus. Skills, interpretation A, fortitude F, sword key F, assassination F, murder F. Status, good. My level had risen by leaps. Although it was thanks to the hero perk 5 times experience booster, I had gained a pretty good amount of experience points because he had a high level for a thief. I had a good feeling going from my first hunt. Ah, right, Hero Nim, didn't your level go up? It did. It had reached level 4 no less. This was at the standard of an athlete of Earth. I'll explain the reason behind it. All living animals and plants possess a power inside of them. Some grow stronger as they develop, but the majority can only increase their power by stealing or consuming, and the accumulated power is shown in the form of level in your status abilities. It was from this point on that the insanity of the fantasy world began. A system wherein you would grow stronger the more you killed. It was a story setting which you would lightly pass over in a growing type role-playing game, but it would become a nightmarish world of survival in reality. Kill your neighbors, do so and you shall become strong. The fantasy god was definitely a pervert. I left the thief's corpse to the security squad patrolling the market. Lenouvel guaranteed our statuses so we were able to lightly pass over the incident. Naturally, the truth that I was the hero wasn't revealed. In a few days rumors would explode throughout the entire kingdom, but hiding it until then would make it easier for me to move around. Lenouvel, take good care of the money bag. Okay Tilda, stop acting cute. Okay. From my experiences, there wouldn't be any more customers with slippery hands today. The danger we posed was bound to have been made known around here after all. Are you Tony's customer? In a dark and shady alleyway, at the promised place which lead to the black market, a scrawny-looking youth asked me this question politely. The dark commerce which worked in the shadows of all the continents of this fantasy world was by no means an easy opponent. Their level of security could be compared to a case of mysophobia, so even if you caught their tail it would be hard to arrive at their body. Even in the first episode one was ultimately unable to find the head, not a customer, but an archenemy. I didn't get careless until the last moment and spoke the promised password. Ha ha, please follow me. The youth gave an amiable smile and immediately led the way, following which we arrived at a 2-story wooden building. It looked extremely ordinary from the outside. Even the interiors were the same as a wealthy home of the kingdom's capital until you entered one of its rooms. Lenouvel murmured to herself as she looked at the diagram drawn on the floor. This is a spatial transfer magic circle. The materials that went into it should be terribly expensive. Spatial transfer magic circle. True to its name, it was a magic circle that transferred space. Anybody could activate this magic circle that was drawn by an excellent mage, as long as a sufficient catalyst was inserted and the promised command was spoken. The black market folk are completely thorough, you see. A spatial transfer magic circle wasn't a cheap item, but it was in fact cheap when taking into account the amount of money traded at the black market, its products, and the safety and trust of its customers. Lenouvel continued to look about. Whoa, I didn't know at all. I thought that the capital's black market would naturally be hidden somewhere in the capital. Don't get surprised at every little thing like a country bumpkin. Woo, Hero Nim is the strange one, I tell you. Even though Lenouvel had called me Hero Nim several times, the expression of the youth who had guided us to this point was calm and composed. He was thinking it was an alias that we had decided on in advance. Sir, please wear this. We received masks for the purpose of hiding our identities and wore them. I had a wolf mask, and Lenouvel a fox mask. While there were the occasional attention whores who boldly roamed the black market without a mask, I couldn't do the same as the hero who would become renowned here and there in the future. I would like to get a bit of a move on. Yes, sir. After the youth confirmed that we had worn our asks and stood atop the magic circle, he quietly muttered the promised command. Soon afterwards, the magic circle enveloped in light activated. Shine. We were instantly transferred to somewhere else from the wooden building. That place was a pitch-dark underground. I held back Lenouvel from trying to use illuminating magic, as that could provoke the guards lurking in the surroundings. This was a place I had experienced in the first episode. A secret hideout built by the dark commerce beneath a forest to the south of the kingdom's capital. It was frequently used as a black marketplace until some moron who was fascinated by a cult performed a demon summoning here. I had come here several times purely as a customer. It is an honor that you came to our market. The middle-aged guide who appeared out of the darkness gave a courteous greeting. I merely slightly nodded my head before asking a question. The auction. It will begin soon. As time is short, I will guide you to your reserved seat after a quick explanation. If you wish to bid, you can lightly press the bell in front of your seat. Payment must always be made in advance, and we receive only coins and gems. We do not take responsibility for problems or losses that result from taking off your own mask or revealing your own identity. I already knew of these things, but it should be Lenouvel's first time hearing it. Miss Extra, you carefully listened to the guide's explanation. Yes. I'm not an extra, I'm Le, MMPH. You should just keep your mouth shut. Quote ellipsis quote. I took away my hand from the mouth of Lenouvel, who was frantically nodding. Archaeologist Lenouvel. She was quite famous in the middle continent of Fantasia. But what was she trying to do by revealing her name at a black market? Things had gone well up to the point of ripping off a load of money from the Dumpling King, but I simply couldn't rest at ease with this caretaker. Follow me. We swiftly moved through a dark tunnel under the lead of the guide. It was absolutely taboo to make trouble here, if you didn't want to be buried alive, that is. Hero Nim. Explosion magic circles are set up everywhere. Lenouvel whispered. I knew this as well. No, I had fully realized it in my experience from the first episode. It has a deep meaning of, never make trouble here if you don't want to get buried 5 floors underground. Aha! We passed through the dark tunnel and arrived in a spacious area. There wasn't a single window as it was underground, yet it was as bright as day on the surface and the air was pleasant. May you have a fruitful time. The guide took his leave after bidding a polite farewell. The area we were led to resembled an awards stage at a broadcasting station. It was a thrust stage which extended into the gallery seats, so that the customers would be able to see the products, slaves, in full detail. All the customers were seated separately according to their respective companions for the sake of privacy. Prepared on top of the round tables which were allocated to each seat were some simple refreshments, and a pure gold tabletop bell. This was precisely the black market, where the Hero Nim's perk would play an active role. Well then, we will now be starting the auction. Clap clap clap, clap clap. The auction host finished his greeting to the dry applause of the customers, and the first merchandise shackled in manacles climbed onto the stage. A seasoned warrior who has survived in the territory of demons. Can you see these scars all over his body? It was by good fortune we found him when he had just slain a powerful demon and was on the verge of dying, so we healed him. The seasoned warrior offered himself as a slave in order to repay this debt. Suitable as a gladiator or bodyguard. Was it truly so? I wondered. Let's check his status. Race, human. Level, 11. Job, warrior. Battle right pointing arrow. Stamina up pointing arrow. Skills, fortune B. Survival E. Swordsmanship F. Status, anxious. Seasoned warrior. My ass. No matter how prettily packaged, it wouldn't work on me. His fortune being the only highly ranked skill he had, strangely enough, there was no blind fool that would pay to buy such a weakling full of hot air. This wasn't a flea market where only a couple of pennies would exchange hands. The people here had an extremely discerning eye for goo. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. It seemed like everyone had a lot of money to spend. Chapter 7, Black Market rhymes with. Ah, I see Hero Nim's plan. You intend on buying excellent slaves and taking them in as companions, right? That's a similar way of thinking to the heroes of ancient. Lenouvel's eyes that were full of expectation sparkled like the Milky Way. I couldn't completely deny her speculation. In the first playthrough, there was really a time when I did this. I had once paid a fortune at the black market to buy a foolish woman who got herself caught trying to save her kin who was kidnapped by slave hunters. A woman who was the future elf king. A bothersome character whose head contained nothing but hatred for humans. Ding dong, ding dong. But even now, the auction went on. Just how much money were they wasting for a level 11 warrior? The value of the seasoned warrior soared like a geyser as the biddings ended up turning into a fight of pride that was typical of nobles. These people were all out of their minds. But anyway, Hero Nim. I feel like that Mr. Slave over there is really strong. Look at those glorious scars all over his body and his fierce-looking brows. Ah, but the scathing Hero Nim is still cooler, of course. Let's just not talk anymore. The weak warrior who had nothing but good fortune was finally sold, at an unbelievable sum which could buy 5 large sailing ships, that is. I felt faint despite that it wasn't my money being spent. What a pity. Miss Extra, there's nothing to feel pity about. The real auction starts now. If we spend our money so lavishly like that from the very beginning, we'll only find ourselves sucking our thumbs when there are goods we really want to buy later on. Though of course, you could still miss out on everything if you were too thrifty. The auctioneer presented the second merchandise. Look at her delicate skin. She is a daughter from a noble family that was captured by demons. It was by coincidence that we picked her up from the street. I will let the gentlemen of the night to find out themselves whether she really is a noble. The dress and the accessories are included. Shall I see whether she really is a noble? Race, human. Level, 1. Job, slave, express 50%. Skills, elegance D, charm E, song and dance E, social interaction F, etiquette F. Status, humiliated. It was clear that she was a daughter of nobility without having to look any further. The skills she possessed were the kind that were difficult for a commoner girl in this fantasy world to attain. Hero Nim, that lady, I'll have you know beforehand, but we didn't come here for fun. Saving a noble loyal to the kingdom is the royal family's job, not ours. Remember that. All right. Subdued by the intensity of my attitude, Lenouvel fell silent. And in any case, there was nothing much to worry about. Even if fallen from grace, a noble was a noble. There would be no moron who would seek out a young lady with education and etiquette as a sex partner. She was very likely to become a personal maid of a noble lady or daughter, though it would be hard to expect a life as comfortable as the one she had before. But she wouldn't be treated as horribly as Lavunel imagined. Congratulations. Clap clap clap. The female slave who was sold expensively to a noble left the stage. Seeing how the price she was bought for wasn't low, her fate was sure to be quite good. It has always been that a slave's treatment would be proportional to their price. Lenouvel asked cautiously, will she be okay? She will. She'll be much safer and happier than if we were to take her away and poorly look after her. I guarantee you this. No master would carelessly mistreat an expensive slave, though I couldn't say there was really no one like that. You talk like you know everything. I do. I knew too. Well, almost to a fault. Memories of the first playthrough flashed across my mind in succession. If the Fairy Queen was here, she would have taken it upon herself to wreck the auction by force and free all the slaves. No, there were times when she had actually just went ahead on her own in matters without consulting me, the hero. She didn't think about the aftermath. When I think of what I had to endure cleaning up after that bitch's mess, I should just split her skull in half if I meet her this time. Hero Nim, it's nothing. After that, the auction gained momentum and proceeded quickly. I repeatedly called out some probing bids several times here and there as well. While I wanted splurge as I pleased, I was being careful since the amount of gold in the pouch wasn't infinite. And then, the opportunity came. Race, human. Level, 286. Job, mercenary. Wealth, right pointing arrow. Survivability, up pointing arrow. Skills, spearmanship, C. Tenacity, D. Survivability, D. Camping, E. Cooking, E. Status, hungry, weakened. The man who staggered up onto the stage was in a dazed state. His pupils were devoid of focus and he was emaciated due to the lack of nutrition, but I could clearly see his true value. Level 286. His skills and status were no concern to me in any way. His level was higher than any of the slaves that had been presented on the stage so far. That was the important point. Here is a mercenary who was active in the northern region of the kingdom. While he may look like this due to having refused to eat for very long, he possesses an outstanding spearmanship. You'll be able to put him to great use as long as he regains his health. The auctioneer tried his best, but the patrons were anything but hyped. It was because trying to convince a slave, who had lost his will to live, to work for you was a hassle in itself. And if you were to fail convincing him in the end, you would have just wasted your money. And this was why they couldn't help but be reluctant about making a bid. Bid on him. But I was the very opposite. That mercenary was exactly the slave I was looking for, perfectly fitting the bill. Okay. Ding dong. Lenouville rang the tabletop bell on my order. The other patrons dived into the bidding fight a step late, but they quickly gave up like an ebbing tide after a tentative probe. Are there no more bids? Anyone who saw the dead fish-like eyes of the mercenary slave would have been the same. The patrons assembled here believed in their own judgments. The bidding would have been 5 times greater had he been in a normal state. After sweeping his gaze across everyone present, the auctioneer started to count down. 3, 2, 1, congratulations. Dear wolf-masked visitor, you have bought a good merchandise at a very good price. It was just as the auctioneer who was congratulating me said. It was a bargain purchase. The other patrons around me might not agree, but that was the limit of those who weren't capable of seeing the status abilities of others. Cling. Lenouville, who took out the gold coins from the money bag, quickly finished settling the purchase. And then she drew her lips close to my ears and asked, "Did you see the mercenary's status abilities?" Yeah, level 286. My god, what a jackpot. That's close to Mr. Alex's level. Now that was a line that would make the future Sword King feel sad. The reason why this mercenary's level was significantly high was simple. He had gone around to all kinds of places and killed many of all sorts of things, although this was no easy feat either. The time period when Alex truly became strong and gained the title of Sword King would follow after the incident of when the kingdom palace he was in charge of defending was utterly razed to the ground by a raid of demons. Before that happened, he was weak due to his low level, and this was because the palace was extremely peaceful in usual times. There was a limit to how high you could raise your level by catching thieves with an average level of 5. Dear patron, here is the key and contract. Leave it on the table. The mercenary we purchased stood waiting behind our table. His arms and legs were shackled so that he couldn't make any funny moves, and 2 security guards of good builds flanked him on both sides to monitor him. The dark commerce, it may be a den of evil, but you had to give them praise where praise was due. Their service was fantastic. At that moment, Lenouville, who had made clinking noises while checking the contents of the money bag, which was still as heavy as ever, asked a strange question with a beaming smile on her face. Hero Nim, are we going back now? Having made a sensible purchase just now, I was in a good mood. I decided to admonish her nicely. Does your head hurt or something? The shopping starts now. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The auction had now entered the middle phase. It was the perfect timing where the expenditure of the fired-up patrons increased due to the fierce bidding war, but the state of my wallet was still adequate. At this time, many good quality items would be presented. Even I ended up becoming excited for no particular reason. Hero Nim. I feel sick inside. Lenouville uttered tension-draining words from the side. Here, people bought and sold other people. Feeling an aversion to this place, her expression was extremely dark. But still she had managed to stay quiet without flaring up or going on a rampage. Honestly, it was to the point that I wanted to praise her. If she were to go wild in this black market which was 5 floors underground, the outcome would be 100% death after all. Everyone was equal before the threat of being buried alive. And even the hero was no exception to that. Bear with it a little more. I didn't have the intention to stay long, even if not for Lenouvel's whining. The patrons would end up running drastically low on coins when the fierce bidding in the auction's middle phase passed, and from that point on the black market would only present petty items that matched the contents of their wallets. It wasn't as if I'd been only twiddling my thumbs and watching all this while. I had been repeatedly calling probing bids and giving it up when a good slave was presented. The money bag provided by the Dumpling King was bulging as ever, but for the time being I had to make do with what I had because of Professor Morel's nagging. The fruit of today's work was one mercenary slave. Not bad. It's about time we g. I froze when I was just about to get up from my seat. And this was because the utterly unexpected had happened right now. The auctioneer shouted, "This here is an elf that we picked up in that famous forest located in the southernmost reaches of the continent. As you can see, her mind is a little broken, but her looks and lineage are of certain quality. And she is chaste. This is a golden opportunity that cannot be missed out on for those patrons who wish for an excellent second generation." Oh, a fantasy world would hardly be fantasy without elves. In English, they were called elves. They were a higher race whose very existence summed up the desires of humans. Their average lifespans were comparable to that of maidenhair trees, 2,000 approximately 3,000 years, and those of pure blood who were called royals were half immortal. Their bone-thin physiques and pointy ears were what distinguished them, and their ears were concentrated erogenous zones, so when you touched them, they would react sensitive. Their sole weak point was their ability to procreate. Following the laws of nature, the elves who had long lifespans had extremely low birth rates. It was at the level of having to use contraceptive pills at all times. And to make matters worse, they had about as much desire for sex as an impotent man or a monk. This was where the misunderstanding and illusion of elves being noble existences came from. And as a result, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. The elves, who lost in the struggle for land against the humans who in contrast had both high reproductive capabilities and vigorous sexual urges, fled into the depths of their forests just as the North American Indians had during the times of the American frontier. And then they were reduced to become sport, to be hunted. If elves had lived on Earth, the environmental organization Greenpeace would have protected them, but there were nothing but poachers in this barbaric world. Hero Nim. That elf is weird. Lenouvel, whose eyes had begun to shine with light when the elf was presented, quietly whispered into my ears. Gone was her whimpering appearance, complaining about feeling sick. There was no doubt that she, who was an excellent magician, had also sensed it, that this elf was special. Race, elf. Level, 851. Job, archer. Skills, archery A, swift marksmanship B, sight C, tracking D, elemental D. Status, cursed, sealed, poisoned, exhausted, anesthetized. There was nothing to think about. Ding dong. I participated in the bidding. The other patrons were focused on the beautiful physique and the lineage of the elf. But I wouldn't have cared even if this elf had been male, impotent, retarded or ugly. It was a jackpot as long as her level was high. Level 851. It was the same level as the pet dog which the Demon King Pedinar raised. This level would match up to a middle-rank demon, I would say. But taking into account that she had the advantage of a superior race and her skill ranks were high, she would be around the middle-high rank. But at present, such evaluations were meaningless. Her status sure is like a jar of rainbows. I couldn't help but smile wryly. The curse she was first afflicted with was likely the doing of a demon. It was a status ailment you would receive upon being defeated by a powerful demon of high rank or greater. This curse greatly lowered the level of the victim. If you were around level 800 like that elf, it could go down as low as level 80. It was a reduction of all your abilities to a tenth of their original. For starters, getting afflicted by it would spell a state of living death. And as for the sealed, poisoned, exhausted and anesthetized status ailments after that, These were no doubt added over multiple stages by the dark commerce who captured the elf so that she wouldn't be able to resist, treating her as you would a ferocious leopardess. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. The bidding was intense, but it fizzled down in a matter of moments like firecrackers at a fireworks festival. The other patrons didn't know of this elf's level, which was why they didn't spread wide their wallets. They weren't going over the price line which they viewed as reasonable. It was only because elves were rare that she had quite the pricey tag on her. Normally, it was the young and tough warriors who were regarded far highly. Because this was a barbaric world, strength spoke for everything. A man who haggled over beautiful women using money was a coward. Only a man who used strength to obtain a woman would be treated as a true man among men. And you didn't exactly need to be strong yourself. Whether it be by slaves or mercenaries, you only needed to steal the women of others who were relatively weaker by using power. Only those with courage can obtain beauties. This saying was correct, but you wouldn't be able to protect a beauty without power. And this was why the value of warriors was higher than that of beauties. What a beautiful fantasy world, was it not? Now then, let's press the bell with my all. Ding dong. Another bid from Sir Wolf Mask. He's a tough one. Are there no more people willing to challenge this gentleman? All the other patrons shook their heads. Although they acknowledged that this elf was a rare beauty, they judged that with such a high price tag on her, it would be of greater benefit to hire another powerful warrior instead. The auctioneer also seemed satisfied at the final bidding price. He slowly began to count down. 3, 2, boom. But it was in that very moment that a loud sound violently exploded throughout the auction. Chapter 8, Kiss of Death. One of the black market entrances had collapsed. This was no natural phenomenon. It was a sign that an uninvited guest, one so powerful that even the hidden guards in that pitch-black tunnel could not stop, had barged in. It should have been normal to be helplessly buried alive when a tunnel 5 floors underground collapsed, but the uninvited guest wasn't one to be so easily dealt with. The tunnel ceased to fall apart as if had never collapsed to begin with. Squirm, squirm. It was all because the dirt, rock and such that were indiscriminately falling from the cracks in the tunnel ceiling had begun to move as if they were living creatures. An earth elemental. It was a pure soul which existed within great nature. Earth, fire, wind, water, heart. They were ethereal creatures of this fantasy world which were said to be capable of facing even the demon King Petinar if all 5 elements were gathered as one. Someone who had become intimate with these elementals would be able to wield miracles more incredible than even the spells of magicians with but a simple request. Just like what was happening now. Rumble. Instead of collapsing, the tunnel grew even wider than before. The tremendous mass of dirt and rock that were pressing down from above were being pushed outwards in reverse and being solidly hardened. It would be difficult to achieve this with just a couple of elementals. There had to be a dozen at the least. This level of affinity wasn't possible for just anyone. If there was one race capable of so skillfully employing elementals, it must be an elf. An elf elementalist has broken in. Stop that elf. Guards. Guards. It couldn't be any other than the elves who were considered as a higher form of humans. The guards who were hidden in various places throughout the black market moved in perfect unison. They mobilized their entire force as the dark commerce would suffer a loss of reputation if their patrons either were injured or died. The average level of the guards was 150, higher than most knights of the kingdom. It was a testimony to how many hellish encounters they had survived through, and as befitting of guards under the dark commerce, they were all the fiercest of the bunch. On the other hand, everyone attack. Let us save our brethren. The intruders were a large number of elves. They were donned in battle vests unique to elves which boasted enhanced defensive capabilities, woven out of layers of a silk spun from a special silkworm. Their main weapon was the bow, only intermittently using elementals or their swords. Their average level of 200 was higher than the black market guards. But this place was the center of enemy territory and they were decidedly at a numerical disadvantage. Yet despite it all, the elves weren't pushed back in the least. Elementals. The reason behind this was the presence of a certain woman in their midst who had cried out loudly. She had longer ears than the other elves. Her outfit was no different from the others, yet the atmosphere surrounding here was different. And it was only natural that was so. Race, Arch-Elf. Level, 284. Job, Shaman. Blessing equals Elemental up pointing arrow. Skills, Elemental S. Elegance A. Charm A. Archery B. Blessing C. Status, Composed. An elf royal had come all the way to grace this filthy black market with her presence. And what's more, she was a familiar face. That strange, nasty hobby of hers remained unchanged from the first playthrough. In order to save her brethren, she would push even more of her people into danger. Elf Queen Sylvia, although she was no more than a princess at present, after the death of the current elf king due to a coup d'état, she would give up her adventuring to return to her homeland and inherit the throne. So that made her the future elf queen. Her level was still low as she had yet to set out on her adventures, but as someone born gifted, the rank of her skills were no inferior than they were in her prime, they were extremely high. In particular, Elemental S was a total beast. Uarg. Saw, save me tilde. It's fire. Every time the fire elementals in the form of snakes spat flames and pounced, the guards would be frightened out of their wits as they screamed. They tried using magic to somehow fight back, but the number of elementals was overwhelmingly high. The elves who had accompanied Princess Sylvia as her guards were also strong. Their skill in the bow was superb, sniping the enemy magicians in the rear who were chanting spells. Sir Wolf Mask. This way. The professional attitude of the black market staff who prioritized the evacuation of their guests even in the midst of this situation almost brought tears to my eyes. While on the other hand, Hero Nim, shall we also help out in the rescue? Lenouvel suggested this as if mocking their efforts. Lenouvel summoned a half-transparent shield with magic. She was using it to diligently block the fireballs shooting over from everywhere. Her expression wasn't one of fright or of panic. She had an honest gaze that spoke of wanting to help the elves who broke in and teach the black market a lesson. She had been feeling uncomfortable all throughout the auction proceedings, and now it seemed she had finally exploded. I could understand that noble sense of justice very well. You should just go and wait in the safety zone. How come? Even though I had said so many times not to talk back. Helping out in the rescue, you say? Are you dumb? What about the mercenary we saved just moments ago? Should we just leave him to die like this? Goodness. To think you'd abandon a comrade who'll be sticking with us from now on. I'm telling you, that's not how you live life. All of the other patrons aside from us had already escaped, but a significant number of slaves whose movements were restricted by shackles had ended up meaninglessly dying due to getting swept up in the ongoing battle. I gave Lenouvel a push from behind. As the hero, I'll handle things on my own here. Go wait at the safety zone along with our new comrade. And take good care of the money bag. Okay. Lenouvel was forced to go, and the mercenary who didn't want to die obediently followed under her protection. And then there was just me. Just as planned. Auctioneer. Gasp. Sir, why aren't you run? Just answer what I'm going to ask. That elf is my possession, correct? The auctioneer gave an exact answer even in the midst of his panic. That is indeed so. Although paying in advance is the basic rule, the elf without doubt belongs to you, sir, as you have clearly won the bid in this situation. From now on, the right to decide the fate of this elf lies with you, Sir Wolf Mask. And so, please come with me to the safety zone. The elf will not resist much as she has been fed anesthetic. The auctioneer was no fool. On the contrary, he belonged to the ranks of extremely clever elites. He had realized the truth that this elf slave was the objective of the elf intruders, and had also figured out the battle wasn't going in their favor. He had no time to take care of an elf who was drugged and cursed, and that was why he decided to pass over this burden over to me, the patron. I'll say, you're quite the able man. His reply had been exactly the one I was waiting to hear. You overpraise me. At the end of those words, the auctioneer drew the sword by his hip. It turned out that this man who had been like a clown atop the auction stage was all along the true hidden expert of this black market. On the other hand, the black market elites who had devoted themselves to moving the patrons with poor protection over to the safety zone began to assemble one after another. I could guess what would happen in the future. The future elf queen would be captured alive here, and then be reduced to a slave. She would be openly displayed for sale in this black market without so much as a scratch inflicted on her even despite this mess she caused. She wouldn't suffer vulgar acts of revenge such as being violated or being beaten. That would drop the value of the merchandise, after all. And after making the sale, a part of the profit would be sent to the bereaved families of the guards who had been killed. Although that would be quite the interesting development in its own way. "Hello, Miss Elf." I started talking to the level 851 elf who was the origin of this incident. "You are." She had managed to immediately size me up even in her clouded state of mind. It seemed she had instinctively realized I was no ordinary human. "I'll get straight to the point. Sylvia will surrender if you remain alive. Do you get my meaning?" The future elf queen hadn't been defeated in battle. In the situation where all the other elves who fought alongside her had died and only she stood strong, the higher-ups of the black market took this elf here as hostage. Overcome by the guilt of having driven her subordinates and friends to their deaths, she gave up on fighting and was caught. And then she was sold as slave. I had heard the gist of this story from the person involved herself. Yes, that child is tender-hearted. It seemed this elf had properly understood what I meant. Despite her enfeebled state, drugged and cursed, she could manage to show an expression of composure that spoke of the resolve to die and be sacrificed. It was the kind of determination impossible for me, someone who feared death. She was like a fireworks going out in a final, beautiful blaze of glory. I roughly hugged the slender waist of the elf with my left arm, and with my right supported the back of her neck and held her head fixed. And then I kissed her deeply. MMPH. Thump thump. She made a weak attempt to resist using her powerless fists, but lasted only a moment. When I gently tickled the end of her pointy ear, as if by reflex, she hugged both her arms around my back in a groping manner and began to respond to my kiss. We sucked on each other's tongue and saliva, indulging deeply in the act. She was clumsy as if this was the first time in her life doing such a thing, but she was immensely passionate. Through her actions, the feelings in this elf's heart was transmitted to me, deeply. She was worried for Princess Sylvia. She didn't want the princess to surrender for somebody like her. She didn't want her to experience the miserable life of a slave for even a moment. I could feel that sincere hope from each and every movement she made. Thanks to that, I was able to enjoy myself as well. "Thank you, really." Crack. The two wide-open eyes of the elf gently closed. Her neck broken, her slender limbs went limp to hang loosely. It hadn't been difficult due to the demon's curse which had reduced roughly 90% of her level. I parted my lips from hers as if savoring the final aftertaste, and then neatly lay here on the ground. I had killed a level 851 elf. The game system really is fantastically retarded. And then I felt an immense power well up within me. Race, Archhuman. Level, 165. Job, Hero Express 500%. Skills, Interpretation A, Murder D, Blessing E, Trading E, Sword Key F. Status, Exultant. This amount of progress would have easily taken a year had I taken the normal route. However, my level had experienced an explosive increase in one go by killing a level 851 elf. What's more was that this elf had blessed me as she died. Is this humming I hear coming from me? HNN_hum_. Things like talent or lineage weren't necessary. Anybody could become strong so long as you killed the strong by whatever method or means. But I suppose you would need a bit of effort and luck to kill them. In any case, it was an opportunity that was open to anyone and everyone. A beautiful fantasy world, brimming with dreams and hopes. Of course, it was only nice when I was doing the winning. Sir Wolf Mask, how could you do such a thing to your... The auctioneer was shocked. He couldn't understand the reason why I had killed an elf I had paid a fortune for. He had been wearing that look of shock from the moment the elf and I had started sharing a hot kiss in the midst of this chaos. It was understandable for him to be confused. There's no problem. I'll pay up the correct amount. The reason being that what I did was the very epitome of waste from the perspective of others. Rather than killing a powerful level 851 warrior to raise your level, it would be overwhelmingly more beneficial to win that warrior over and have him as your subordinate. No, in the first place, the truth that this elf was level 851 wasn't even known in this black market. But I was the hero. I had the perk of a 5-fold experience bonus. In short, it meant that what I did was no different than killing 5 level 851 elves. And that wasn't the end of it either. There were still plenty of experience remaining around. Whistle. An arrowhead grazed past my cheek. It was shot by an elf archer. I had been identified as an enemy from the moment she witnessed me killing the level 851 elf from quite close by. She had a pretty face that was twisted by fury and sorrow. And it wasn't only that archer who was enraged. "How dare you do such a thing to master?" The future elf queen cried out as if weeping. Apparently, the level 851 elf I had killed was her mentor. Seeing how the mastery of elementals was largely influenced by natural talent, perhaps she had learnt archery from that elf. The other elves who had been in the midst of battle began to glare at me as well. The look in their eyes was rather turbulent, so much so that they would have charged at me altogether had it not been for the black market guards standing in their way. Really now, sheeing. I picked up a sword, its shape unclear in the darkness, which had fallen to the ground. It wasn't a heavy great sword which I favored, but a bastard sword which was halfway between a one-handed and two-handed sword. Still, it was perfect for casual use before tossing away. My current level was 165. The things I couldn't do as a level 4 had now become possible. For example, now then, it's time to get slashin' for my dream. I did as much work as I was paid to do. So there would be no occurrence of the elf princess ending up a slave. Chapter 9, Soar Higher, My Express. Dash. I slightly bent my knees before kicking off in a sprint. But dispiritingly, my level 165 body began screaming out in protest from the start. I had thought this would get a little better if my level rose, but compared to my prime when I busted the Demon King's ass, level 4 or level 165 was small fry level all the same. But this was all relatively speaking as well. Race, elf. Level, 189. Job, archer. Archery equals piercing up. Skills, archery D, accuracy D, foraging E, resting E, swordsmanship F. Status, battling hard. This was the status of the elf archer who had wounded my cheek. Her skill set was lacking in focus and even her reaction to my approach was poor. She didn't try to create distance as if thinking her arrow shots would only naturally make their mark. The elf released the bowstring of her bow. Twang. The arrow shot forth in a straight line, accurately targeting my vital as I charged forward. It was such a straightforward attack that it put me on the verge of laughing. "Oh, come on. I can see where your eyes are looking." Ting. Swip. Ting. I either dodged the incoming arrows or parried them with my sword. Perhaps it might have been different had those arrows, which drew a parabola as they came flying, contained a fantasy-like element such as changing trajectory or accelerating by influence of a wind elemental or magic, but these kinds of ordinary arrow shots were no different than child's play. What's more, she was even telling me where she was targeting with her pretty little eyes. Ho, how? The elf belatedly retreated with a face of disbelief. Her decision of swiftly abandoning the bow and drawing the dagger by her hip despite her panic was impressive. It was just that her response was mistaken. FWRRSH. Also taking into account the fire elemental which was targeting my side, I vertically slashed down my raised bastard sword. Hike. The elf hurriedly raised her dagger horizontally above her head to block, but it failed to stop the momentum of the sword which carried the entire weight of my body. I lightly ignored the burns inflicted on my back and waist by the fire elemental. So long as my bones and tendons weren't injured, it would have no effect on battle. Splat. That's one for starters. The elf whose pretty little head was split apart like a watermelon crumpled down. She hadn't even shown anything worthy of being called swordsmanship. Since she had chosen to use a dagger, whether its purpose was for self-defense or just carrying around, she shouldn't have retreated and instead made a deep lunge towards the chest of this big brother right here. Daggers had shorter range than longswords after all. But that charming little elf had attempted to create distance instead of closing it, a clear lack of experience. This meant that she had never fought against a human before. Or that she had only ever shot arrows gracefully from afar. Clang. I threw away the bastard sword on the spot as its blade was damaged from splitting the skull of an elf which had the hardness of a level 189. It wasn't damaged to the point of being entirely useless, but I had just found a better weapon then. Talk. Out of the air, I caught the dagger which had left the hand of the elf who was now a bloody heap. The dagger was a stiletto which had a distinctive fine blade and extremely sharp point. It was the weapon of an assassin specialized for stabbing. Although I was one to prefer heavy two-handed armaments that were like siege weapons, this stiletto was a bit of an exception. There wasn't a single chip on its blade despite having clashed with the bastard sword. Perhaps it was a superior item which was made with quite the effort. Bastard. You killed her. Immediately afterwards, an elf male attacked me from behind while bellowing, "There's an even bigger fool over here." While I had long noticed it from the chilling flow of air touching my skin, shouldn't you not scream if you're going to sneak attack? It was such a blatant move that for a moment I could have suspected it to be a diversion or mind game. The weapon of my attacker was a rapier which had a long and thin blade, a longsword which suited a feeble-looking elf male. It was completely opposite to my preferences, but I wanted it as well. The opponent was right-handed, so I gripped my stiletto in my left hand. The elf drew near, aiming for my back with his rapier. I spun my body like a top while holding the stiletto in a reverse grip and then brought it to meet the rapier at a slant. Tick, tick. Blue sparks arose, caused by the friction of metal against metal. In that state, I slid the stiletto up from the end of the rapier's blade to its hilt like riding a train rail. And finally, hi there, Huck. I had drawn close enough for a certain two sweaty men to share a hot embrace. The dagger had fallen into my hand at an extremely advantageous timing. The eyes of the elf male who knew this fixed itself on the stiletto. He was wary of the dagger's next course of movement. He was truly an easy-to-understand friend. And because of this, while just barely holding in the laughter which threatened to burst from me, I tightly curled up my right hand which had been lonely from having nothing to hold into a tight fist. And then I returned his kindness with a hard punch. Smack. Goo. My right fist landed a direct hit on the tip of the pretty boy elf's slender chin. His jaw was sent spinning and his head slumped backwards. This friend had apparently been hastily attempting something using his left hand as well, but I was too busy to pay attention to that as well. With a quick movement, I grabbed the elf male who was out of it by the throat and then moved him to and fro like a shield, using him to block the arrows and elementals' attacks flying at me. Hook, hook, smack, boom, hook. This friend was sturdier than most shields due to his high level, and he had the distinctive slender physique of an elf, so he was even light. Moreover, he had yet further value as he was still alive. The arrow shots decreased in frequency. Elf buddy, let's switch weapons. Cog. I deeply stabbed the stiletto into the elf male's belly. He wouldn't die easily as I had avoided any major arteries. In my left hand I held the rapier I had exchanged with him as a sign of friendship, and in my right I wielded the friend I just made like a shield and charged in. The other elves who were surprised by our camaraderie didn't know what to do. They were hesitant to attack their own kin who was still alive, and so I decided help them make a decision a little. I slashed out with the rapier in my left. Hya, this makes two. The cute head of a young elf girl holding a staff flew up into the air, and as a result, a dozen or so elementals vanished from this battlefield like they were illusions. That was payback for my well-done waste from the fire before. SPLRRSH. Blood shot up from the severed part of the girl's neck like a fountain. And right next to her corpse, another pretty little elf, drenched in the blood of the cute one whose head had gone missing, was babbling her friend's name as she wailed in grief. I thrusted my rapier into her open mouth. Hya, what a great singer. 3. I had ripped through her hindbrain, which was the part of a brain responsible for controlling respiration, heartbeat, digestive functions and so on, so she would have no hopes of surviving that. And this friend of mine in my right hand was about to reach his limit too. It's time for me to forget this short friendship of ours. 4. Crack. I snapped the neck of the elf male I had used well as a shield, since his express would disappear if he died naturally from excessive blood loss. After I retrieved the stiletto which was exchanged as a sign of friendship, his corpse was set afire by a ball of fire shot by a fire elemental. Ordinary corpses were level 0. Apart from the bodies of races which were sturdy from birth, corpses were no more than lumps of flesh that couldn't be used as shields. In particular, elves were as fragile as dog bones. Kill that human. Unforgivable. The enraged elves aimed their bows and staves at me all together, but I wanted to advise them that their actions were very much rash. I wasn't the only one here. The black market guards were facing the battle with clear heads despite the death of their comrades. They were pushing back the intruders so hard that even the furious elf princess couldn't pay me attention. In contrast, the elves were easily swayed by their emotions. This was because the elves who possessed long lifespans spent hundreds of years together with the people around them, their neighbors, comrades, friends and the like. They would live as a community for a long time and naturally grow to become like family. This was a strength and at the same time a weakness. And at present, this weakness was standing out clearly. Blockade the exit. Provide cover for Sir Wolf Mask. Hurry with assisting the flank. The black market guards began to press the attack. The elves had revealed too many openings as a result of losing their calm at the grotesque death of their comrades who were like family. The elves began to collapse one after another like dominoes. Ah, damn. I felt like I was about to cry of regret each time I witnessed the miserable end of an elf who fell down like dry straw. My precious EXPs. My EXPs were lessening at every passing moment, and the elf princess's state of mind worsened the more it went on. She went on a wild rampage alongside the elementals like a crazy bitch souped up on chemicals. But even so she was strong. Today would have been the day I died had I not raised my level further. This wasn't the time to be fighting with caution. I should battle with the resolve to lose a finger or two at least. My growth was only starting now. Every word has power, was it said. I really did get a finger sliced off. For that I received a nice bit of express as compensation. Dirty bastard, shooting off sword key after feigning weakness. I picked up my right forefinger, which had been cut off in my attempted bare-handed blade block, from the dirt. My conceit had almost cost me my neck instead of a finger. I used the clean battle vest of one of my attackers, who had become a cold dead body about 10 seconds before, to meticulously wipe off the dirt on the severed part of my finger. Talk. And then I very carefully stuck it back where it was originally connected. It felt slightly crooked, but I was probably imagining it. Hog, ha, Herg, are you a demon? The future elf queen, who had survived by herself just like in the first playthrough, asked me this as she took ragged breaths. The look in her face had gone from fury to fright. It seemed she was truly mistaking me for a demon. That's a sad thing to say when we've both done a share of the slaughtering. History had changed because of my interference. The black market side which had failed to take a hostage didn't manage to get the rampaging elf princess to surrender and in the end, suffered losses close to a wipeout. You could tell how many humans in the level 150s had died just by looking at the princess's changed level. Race, Arch-Elf. Level, 288. Job, Shaman. Blessing equals Elemental. Up. Skills, Elemental S. Elegance A. Charm A. Archery B. Blessing C. Status, Fractures, Bleeding, Exhausted, Self-Reproaching. Her level had gone up by a whole 4. And as for me, Race, Arch-Human. Level, 203. Job, Hero. Express 500%. Skills, Interpretation A. Murder B. Throwing C. Berserk D. Taunt E. Status, Regenerating, Turmoil. My level had increased by 199 in this black market alone. As for skills, they were a trifling change so it was nothing to pay attention to. I had clearly witnessed the effect of the 5-fold Express Hero perk this time round. My level had shot up and I had grown stronger with every elf with the average level of 200 that I killed. I had to give thanks to the encouragement and support of my elf friends who had become Express for my dream. Wouldn't I be able to have the Demon King at my mercy within 6 months if I raised my level at this pace every day? Now there was only one Express remaining. An old comrade whom I couldn't let escape ever. Sylvia's was exhausted, had suffered fractures and was bleeding. And these conditions were all at a serious degree which meant the black market elites had absolutely whittled down her life. It was now hard for her to even take one step forward. However, she still had her strongest method of attack at her disposal. Demon, you'll die here together with me. Elementals of Earth. The elf princess cried out in a fierce voice. It seemed she had no intention of abandoning the corpses of her comrades and friends, who had followed her to their deaths, and running away. The corpses of elves were traded for a considerable price. Like how virgins symbolized purity, the blood and bone of elves were often used as magic catalysts that held the meaning of eternity, in the form of meat that was cut up like you would have at a butcher's. It was impossible that Sylvia, who loathed humans, didn't know about this. And that was why. You intend on turning this place into all of our graves. What a riot. You're the one who invited your comrades and friends to this hell of an ant's nest. Isn't that right? This princess planned on causing this black market to cave in using the earth elementals, taking herself down along with it. Demon, it's your fault. Things wouldn't have come to this if not for you. We would have won. There would have been no problem if we won. Don't involve your comrades without even being prepared to suffer defeat. That's called causing trouble. And you've been insisting I'm a demon from a while ago, but... I slowly drew nearer towards her, and I took off the wolf mask which was stained with the crimson blood of elves. Rumble, silence. The earth elementals who were about to collapse the black market stopped their destruction. They didn't move an inch even when the elf princess desperately begged them to. Was it because they didn't want her, their friend, to die? That wasn't it. Why are you protecting this demon? Sylvia fell into confusion at this unknown situation. Betrayed by the elementals whom she had unconditionally trusted until now. I smoothly stabbed my stiletto into the elf princess's heart, who was at a loss because of this betrayal. And after that, I told her the reason behind it. Elementals, you see, consider the great hero far more important than your fake friendship, using them like murder tools while calling them friends. Elementals loved nature, and to protect nature, they couldn't do without the hero Nim slaying demon King Petinar. It would be a huge problem for them if the hero ended up buried alive before that happened. Hero. Sylvia asked this with wide open eyes, as if hoping I would tell her I was joking. Let's not meet for the third time, Sylvia. Thud. The future elf queen had become a stepping stone for the great hero. You should be honored. Perplexed. So you massacred the elves. It is said that the union of anger and revenge gives birth to the daughter called cruelty. That daughter is troublesome and difficult to handle. Good is as heavy as lead, whereas evil is as light as a feather. It seems it will be difficult for you to graduate even if you defeat the Demon King at this rate. The indignation of it all. My dear respected Professor Morals. Those violent elves were the first to attack me. Verdict. Forbearance brings peace while impatience spawns regrets. Would it not have been resolved in a good way had you tolerated it? Patience and time is capable of much more than power or anger. Student Kong Han Su. Do not rush but instead look around you calmly. What do you see? Express. I think I'm capable of killing Sword King Alex now. Chapter 10. Everybody all together, cheers. Dismay. Do not view weak comrades as express. A dwarf sitting atop a giant's shoulder sees farther than the giant, and a pope and farmer together can no more than they could alone. Try building harmony with a smiling face even if others may not be to your liking. This is homework. And so Professor Morals left me with a difficult homework and left. He said he would come back after 2 days this time, I think. I should think on it a little during that time. About what? Lenouvel, who had picked up those words meant for myself, asked me with a tilted head. And what about you, Lenouvel? What are you doing here? Me. Assisting hero Nim. I remember leaving you to clean up the aftermath at the black market though. Just the matter of sending the elves' corpses back to their home shouldn't be so simple. The corpses of elves had many uses as magic materials. If they were simply left at the black market, somebody would cut them up into parts and sell them off to magicians at a high price like meat from the butchers. This was the one thing that had to be prevented. I couldn't let others reap the fruits since I was the one who did the work. I had to rack my head quite a bit in order to solve this problem. The bereaved families of the black market guards who had fought together couldn't be neglected, and moving so many elf corpses from somewhere 5 floors underground to the royal palace would also take work. Thus, I proceeded in the direction of fully utilizing the gold in my money bag and purchasing the elves' corpses at a low price, paying the handling fee to an associate of the black market to safely deliver them to the palace. How did the negotiation go with the Elf King? I told the whole story using a magic orb, so it went well. A group of envoys from the elf country are expected to visit the kingdom before long, bringing with them the payment which Hero Nim strongly insisted on. I see. That's the most important thing. I had spent every penny I had in order to take over the elf corpses from the black market. It would be a real headache if somebody didn't fill up my money bag again. The people of villages and cities wouldn't provide free shelter and clothes just because I was the hero who was going to save the world. It would be fortunately enough if they didn't try to overcharge me as they would to tired and weary travelers. If you didn't have money for traveling, you would easily end up starving to death unless you took up mercenary work and labored like those heroes in novels or comics. 3 days had passed in this fantasy world. Everyone had the wrong idea about my level, thinking I was level 4. And that was why even the Elf King couldn't even imagine that his own daughter had picked a fight with the hero and ended up killed in return, and there was no one who remembered my deeds in the previous incident as the black market guards were wiped out. Even Lenouvel thought the matter had ended in mutual destruction. Hey, hero, it's been going around that you've switched profession to an undertaker. These kinds of rumors were truly trifling issues. Alex, who had been training the palace knights at the training grounds exclusive to the palace, had come over after spotting me to taunt me. My hazing would take place in these grounds 2 days later. Alex was apparently impatiently waiting for that day. You and me both. Race, human. Level, 291. Job, swordsman. Skills, swordsmanship S, stamina A, iron wall B, resistance B, fortitude C. Status, expectant. Sword King Alex was born to be the vanguard, or in English, a tanker. People held the misconception that a swordsman can only be amazing if he possesses swordsmanship that can figuratively cleave apart the world, but in reality the kind of swordsman that was wanted on a battlefield was one that could slay their enemies for a prolonged time while protecting their allies. The reason why Alex would later be called the Sword King was because he was not only capable of protecting his allies like an iron wall, but he could also carry out solo missions. He possessed a swordsmanship and endurance that even if he were dropped in the middle of enemy territory, he could leisurely return without being encircled. The stronger version of a Sword King was a hero. Correct. I've switched job to an undertaker. To ready your coffin, Alex. You could even defeat the Demon King with that tongue of yours. Who knows? Looking back on my first playthrough, Demon King Pedinar had a better way with his words, vexing though it may be. I was completed defeated in the Battle of Silver Tongues. But this time for sure I was going to win. Hero, I could skip those 2 days and start guiding you even today. You shouldn't be going sniffing around in markets if you want to receive my forgiveness even a day sooner, no. I'm not in a hurry, so scram. My level would be brought to light when training began. The one thing I wanted to avoid happening was the Elf King suspecting me, so it wouldn't do not to act like someone level 4 on the outside. I planned on creating an excuse for my level before long. I just had to hide it until I made it seem as if I had entered the ancient ruins of some deep forest and raised my level. Haven't I grown quite a bit? I had put Professor Morrel's teachings to practice and was earnestly enduring. If it was the me of the past, I would have already cut Alex's throat in a fit of anger, but now I had grown to the point where I could let his taunts pass like water. Could it be that I'm a genius? Hero Nim, so what's your plan for today? Lenouvel asked warily. Had yesterday's events at the black market been such a shock to her? I found this hard to understand. It wasn't as if I had piled up a mountain of corpses, after all. I should strike up a friendship with our new companion. Ah, that mercenary. I had been forgotten about it from yesterday due to the elf matter, but the mercenary slave who was supposed to be turned into my express was saved and brought to the palace. Has his health recovered somewhat? Seeing as how Professor Morrels did warn of not viewing weak comrades as express, I planned on using the slave as a luggage carrier or the like. In the first playthrough I had even adventured to the remote parts of Fantasia in search of legacies of ancient civilizations, legendary relics and such, but this time around I had no intention of wasting time wandering about. I was going to choose my destinations only as necessary to my needs. Yes, he's been hugely motivated ever since hearing that he'd become the hero's companion instead of a slave. I hear he's eating so much to the point of frightening the palace chef and quickly recovering his stamina. That's a relief. It was a recovery speed that matched that of a level 286. The effects that came with level survival style in Fantasia were incredible. In exchange for being unable to concentrate and increase a desired status ability like in a role-playing game, you would gain an overall enhancement, lifespan, resistance, agility, strength, regenerative ability, 5 senses, magic power. There was no end to the list. Really pisses me off the more I think about it. The level 1 raised over 10 years resetted in just one trip back in time. This return to the past had convinced me of something: a fantasy world was just fantasy in the end. I had confirmed the truth that all of the teaching staff and the mastermind behind them could reset my level and skills whenever they pleased if they so wished. Magic, sorcery, martial arts, elementalism, engraving, blessing, fantasy skills that I could obtain with a little effort as someone with the 5-fold express perk. All of those weren't my things. They were nothing but a figment of imagination that would disappear upon the intervention of some transcendental entity. Science was the one and only truth and power. From now on I planned on drastically moderating my gathering of equipment as well as reducing my reliance on them, since they would serve no meaning if they were confiscated upon my return to Earth, and this included the holy sword unique to the hero. There was no way all the heroes returning to Earth after defeating the Demon King would be given a portable nuclear weapon, unless it was with the intent of destroying Earth. There's not as many places worth going to as I thought. Nothing much would remain of the fantasy world when excluding the fantasy part. Earth was overwhelmingly advanced in all aspects of science and technology. The one branch of science worth mentioning in this world was called magic engineering, while the rest were mainly a dubious fusion of science and magic. It wasn't the kind of power I sought. Hero Nim, where are you going today? Lenouvel asked in a cutely serious tone. Too tired to even tell her not to act cute, I instead calculated the distance to our destination in my mind. It's not a distance that can be traversed back and forth in a single day. It would still take 2 days even if we use the kingdom's spatial transfer magic circle. We have to hurry the preparations for the journey starting today. We'll set off as soon as we receive the payment from the elf envoys. I didn't have even the slightest thought of walking on my 2 feet. I intended on traveling swiftly and comfortable even if it costed a bit. Wyverns, carriages, spatial transfer magic, large sailing ships, magic trains, there were quite many methods of getting around if you looked for it. And the biggest advantage of all these, the chances of being held back by running into a villager who brought danger on themselves by leaving the safety of their village or perhaps encountering some suspicious individuals become drastically lowered. Time and safety could be bought with money, this was my firm belief. We'll probably require His Majesty the King's royal sanction if it's far away. He'll approve. What that Dumpling King wants is something I know very well. He'll obediently give permission so long as I promise to come back for sure after finishing my business, though it's uncertain whether Alex will tag along as a monitor. Is it a ruins? No. We'll be going to meet a mighty being. A great, grand and mighty being. If my spiritual mentor was the pub bartender Tony, the one I was going to meet was the mentor who granted me my physical power. An elder dragon. It's an insult to compare that person to those flying lizards that can't even amount to their own ages. That's all you need to know. Who Matilda? Lenouvel gazed at me with an interested look. What? I just found it curious that Hero Nim has someone you respect. You look down on others as if you know everything, after all. I look down on them because they deserve it. The very idea of respecting these savages of Fantasia was a stretch in of itself. Imperials, royals, nobles and great merchants were no exception either. Would you be able to view as equals those who didn't even invent flush toilets using their fancy magic and instead lived in a filthy manner? It wasn't as if they weren't capable of it. These people didn't do so because they felt it unnecessary, a difference that was not in civilization but in cultural awareness. Afterwards, we talked about the items too. Be prepared for the journey, but there had been no need for me to take the lead on this topic because archaeologist Lenouvel, who would go around searching for famous ruins and ancient temples, was extremely familiar with traveling. She lived up to being the hero's companion no. 1 feet who received the oracle. Though it would be even better if she didn't habitually act cute. Hero Nim, His Majesty is looking for you. I am to tell you that the group of envoys from the country of elves, Elfheim, has just arrived. It was then that a palace knight approached us with swift footsteps to deliver a message. Not even a day had yet to pass, yet the people of the elf country had arrived. Perhaps it was only natural as their dearly precious princess had passed away. As for me, I was happy with not having had to wait. Let the dumpling, ahem. Let his brilliant majesty know that he may deal with them as he will. I just need to receive the money. The envoy group requests to meet you, Hero Nim. Ask his majesty to refuse them. This should make that dumpling king beam with a smile. It seems that will be a bit difficult, as it turns out the first prince of Elfheim has accompanied the envoy group. Balls. A disgustingly powerful middle boss was calling for me. There was no way I couldn't go. Arch-elves. These elf royalty theoretically lived forever. Anti-aging was a basic feature that came along with all elves, and because they became completely immune to illnesses if their level rose even a little, it was a truly rare occurrence for them to die outside of being murdered. What's more, there weren't even that many powerful individuals who could kill these elf royalty. This was due to the characteristic of levels. A level that was raised once wouldn't go down even with the passing of time. While there were the occasional cases of levels being stolen or lost under the effect of certain special powers, they would never deteriorate spontaneously. And then there was the fact that elf royalty lived forever. What's the relation between those two things, you might ask? It meant that elf royalty would eternally grow stronger as their express piled up like layers of sediment. Of course, skills could fall in rank or be forgotten and lost in the passing of years, but these would also rise steadily in proficiency like levels as long as they were constantly polished. And thus, this kind of monster would be born. Race, Arch-Elf. Level, 999+. Job, Swordsman. Skills, Swordsmanship SS, Sword Key S, Regeneration A, Elementalism A, Majesty A. Status, Satisfied. Level 999 was the limit of what could discerned using the hero perk. If the level was any higher than that, it would be shown as above with a plus sign. Level 1000 would be shown as 999+. Level 5000 would also be shown as 999+. Thus from that point on, you had no choice but to estimate an opponent's combat ability by relying on luck and instinct. In the past, wary of this invisible level, I had only trusted the widespread rumors around me and invested long years into training and adventuring. However, Demon King Petinar had turned out to be far weaker than I had predicted. In comparison to what I had experienced at that time, this handsome elf was far higher up on the danger scale, the reason being that he wasn't an opponent I had properly prepared myself to fight against like with the Demon King. And that was why I called him a middle bosses. His history went as follows. The incumbent elf king enacted a national isolation policy. He cut off contact with the humans who occupied the middle continent of Fantasia and remained within the elf country, maintaining seclusion for hundreds of years. And harboring opposition towards this, the first prince caused a rebellion. He murdered his own father and inherited the throne. If memory serves correctly, his name was I am Gnosis. It is an immeasurable honor to meet the widely rumored great hero of legend. I also do not know how to express my thanks regarding your protecting my sister and fellow countrymen. Leave aside the stiff title of prince and just call me Gnosis. Hero Nim is qualified to do so. He was an extremely likable individual. It wasn't like all elves were violent like Sylvia. A pleasure to meet you, Gnosis. I sincerely wish for a beautiful world where humans and elves will live in harmony akin to our meeting. That is my wish also. Cheers. Ha ha ha. Ain't nothing wrong with becoming friendly with the middle boss, right? Today as well, I put Professor Morrel's teachings to good practice.